1963, an aerospace engineer named Chan Thomas published a book. He believed that if its contents were ever made widely public, all of world history would have to be rewritten from the ground up, but that never happened. Before the first printed copies had even fully dried, the CIA abruptly classified it and barred anyone from accessing it. It took exactly 50 years of waiting before, under legal pressure, the CIA was finally forced to place it on its official website. But why were they so afraid of an aerospace engineer? What terrifying secret was actually hidden inside those pages that had been locked away for half a century? In truth, Chan Thomas was not the only victim. It was not only Chan Thomas's book. The CIA has also been accused of intervening in sealing off and locking down numerous ancient documents directly connected to the Bible. Why would a modern intelligence agency tremble before religious texts that are thousands of years old? What were they afraid of in those pages? Or is it possible that the revelations about the true origin of humanity, even the warnings about the end of the world, were real all along, which is why they worked so hard to bury them? Right now, let SleepCodex lead you into the shadows of history as we uncover 6 books banned by the CIA and the dark truths they never wanted you to see. Book number 1, The Adam and Eve Story. We begin our journey into the Forbidden Zone with the title that has fueled endless headlines and speculation, The Adam and Eve Story by Chan Thomas. The story begins in 1963 at the height of the space race. Chan Thomas was a rather mysterious figure. Although he began as an electrical engineer, he later studied paleontology, geology, anthropology, and other fields. In the end, he became an aerospace engineer and a UFO specialist, working for McDonnell Douglas, the giant corporation behind some of America's most advanced military projects. Around that same time, he also published a book titled The Adam and Eve Story. But this was not an ordinary book interpreting the Bible. It was a chilling scientific dossier that challenged every geological and historical foundation humanity had ever known. The moment the first printed copies left the press, something unprecedented happened. The CIA appeared. There was no public announcement, no formal administrative ban. Yet the book was suddenly withdrawn and stamped classified. Why would one of the world's leading intelligence agencies move to lock down a book about religion and geology? That very absurdity turned the book into a dark legend for 50 years. Until a fragile 57-page copy out of the original hundreds of pages was declassified in 2013, though it still remained filled with suspicious blacked-out sections. Why was the CIA so afraid of Chan Thomas? The answer lies in the mysterious content revealed in the book. In the book, Thomas presents evidence suggesting that the Earth is undergoing a polar shift. He argued that polar shifts occur cyclically, arising at intervals and triggering catastrophes so immense that they could destroy the entire planet. After such a disaster, the lucky survivors like new Adams and Eves would begin building a new civilization from nothing. Thomas believed that our Earth has already gone through at least 5 destroyed civilizations and is now in the era of the 6th advanced civilization. Perhaps before these 6 civilizations, there were even older and more advanced ancient civilizations. But the farther back time stretches, the fewer traces remain, and the harder they are to identify because the continents that once carried those ancient civilizations have vanished beneath the sea. On this point, Thomas was not the first to propose the theory of polar shift. In 1958, the American professor and author Charles Hapgood published a book titled Earth's Shifting Crust, a key to some basic problems of Earth science. In that book, Hapgood proposed a theory related to continental displacement, believing that at times an unusual acceleration in the Earth's rotation could cause the continents to rearrange themselves. This hypothesis was fiercely attacked by mainstream scientists of the time and dismissed as pseudoscience. Yet Albert Einstein became one of Hapgood's supporters and even wrote the foreword to his book. Later, after collaborating with scientists such as Einstein, Hapgood published a new book, The Path of the Pole, in 1968, updating his theory. In that book, Hapgood proposed that the Earth's poles are constantly moving. It is no surprise that this view was also labeled pseudoscience. Yet today, we all know that both of Hapgood's theories were correct. The continents are drifting, and the poles are moving as well. So sometimes the things called pseudoscience are not necessarily false, after all. Sometimes it is simply that when human understanding is still incomplete, people do not easily accept unknown realities that run against the knowledge system they already hold. Hapgood also speculated that around 9,600 BC, or approximately 11,600 years ago, the Earth may have experienced a very rapid pole shift of 15 to 40 degrees, resulting in violent climatic upheavals across the continents of that time. In the Adam and Eve story, Thomas proposed that events of this kind have happened many times, and that such catastrophic transformations could be completed in less than a single day. Thomas even described in detail what the world would look like after a civilization was struck by such a pole shift. It begins with a deep rumbling sound, almost too faint to notice, followed by a deafening roar. The ground starts shaking violently. Savage winds begin howling, mountains collapse, and the earth splits open. In California, the mountains would shake like ferns swaying in the wind. The vast Pacific Ocean would roll backward, forming gigantic tsunamis, more than 3,200 meters high, racing toward the west coast of the United States at tremendous speed, instantly swallowing Los Angeles and San Francisco. The water would continue devouring the continent at terrifying speed. In just 2 hours, it would sweep from the western shore to the eastern shore, leaving behind nothing but ruins. Europe would not escape the same fate of being drowned by the sea. The Alps, the Pyrenees, and the Ural Mountains would be compressed and thrust even higher as the tsunami struck. West Africa and the Sahara Desert would also disappear. On Earth, winds moving at 1,667 kilometers per hour would mercilessly tear apart every obstacle in their path. Why would there be such violent winds? As we know, the Earth rotates at a speed of 1,667 kilometers per hour. We do not feel this because everything is rotating together, the land, the oceans, and the atmosphere. But when a polar shift occurs, the air and water on Earth keep moving while the continents come to a stop. Thomas says, imagine what would happen if everyone were sitting inside a car, traveling at 1,667 kilometers per hour, and that car suddenly came to a complete stop. In addition to earthquakes, raging winds and tsunamis, massive volcanic eruptions would break out in many places across the Earth, with lava exploding upward in tremendous force, creating blazing seas of fire. The entire landmass of Earth would be buried beneath gigantic waves or consumed by molten lava, and all civilization would perish. When a pole shift occurs, the continents of the Earth stop moving, and as a result, the sun appears fixed in the sky. This means that one side of the Earth would become extremely hot, while the other side would become extremely cold, with temperatures falling to negative 180 degrees. Even the warmest places on Earth could rapidly drop to negative 80 degrees. Everything would freeze solid within 4 hours. On this point, Thomas offers some highly persuasive evidence. In the frozen lands of Siberia, Russia archaeologists excavated a baby mammoth from tens of thousands of years ago. When the baby mammoth was dug up, its flesh had not yet decomposed and was still edible. As we all know, even our electrically powered freezers need quite a long time to freeze a single steak. To freeze an entire elephant in an instant would require a speed and intensity of freezing almost beyond imagination. What is more, archaeologists also found buttercup flowers in the baby mammoth's mouth, which suggests that this catastrophe may have happened in a single instant. This small yellow flower also drew the attention of researchers. They discovered buttercup seeds in the stomachs of both the baby mammoth and the adult mammoth beside it, and they also uncovered buttercup flowers beneath the ice. This suggests that tens of thousands of years ago, buttercups once grew on this land of Siberia. But how could that be? Buttercups are regarded as tropical plants that love sunlight. So how could they possibly have grown in the ice and snow of Siberia? Unless this place was once a warm landmass, but during a polar shift, it was moved to this location, causing everything to freeze in an instant. In addition, some ancient books also contain descriptions of the sun standing still. For example, in the book of Joshua in the Hebrew Bible, it is recorded that Joshua performed a miracle that caused both the sun and the moon to stand still. And the Israelites used that opportunity to defeat their enemies. Such a miracle sounds hard to believe. But if it had never truly happened, then why would the ancients have created such a scene? How did they even imagine something like that? They could have written something that fit ordinary human understanding, such as violent storms and heavy rain, and that still could have displayed Joshua's extraordinary power. Could this instead be a record of one of the Earth's polar shifts? Let us continue with Thomas's description of polar shifting. He says that this sweeping tsunami would last for 6 days. On the 6th day, the oceans would finally begin to calm again. This time, the Earth's poles would have shifted by 90 degrees. In essence, the geographic poles would become the equator, and the equator would become the poles. The Bay of Bengal basin east of India would now lie at the North Pole, while the Pacific Ocean west of Peru would lie at the South Pole. New ice caps would begin forming in the new polar regions. Greenland and Antarctica would move closer to the equator and become lush tropical oases. If these descriptions still do not give you a shockingly vivid sense of reality, you may want to watch the film 2012, because the disaster scenes in that movie are almost identical to what Thomas described. And yet Thomas insisted that he was not writing science fiction. Everything he described, he claimed, was a real scene that had truly happened. But if you think this is nothing more than a Hollywood disaster script, then remember, this John Thomas was an engineer grounded in real numbers. He insisted that what he wrote was not imagination, but a journal recording this planet's horrifying past. And strangely enough, the clearest evidence for those real scenes was not found in a laboratory, but in the most enduring sacred texts of humanity themselves, the legend of the prehistoric Great Flood. Take a look at what John Thomas called real scenes. First, open the Bible. There we find the Great Flood and Noah's Ark, a fury of water that submerged even Mount Ararat in eastern Turkey. Do you know how high Mount Ararat is? 5,165 meters. Just imagine water rising more than 5 kilometers high, swallowing every living thing on the face of the earth. But if you think this is only a solitary religious story, then you are mistaken. Thousands of miles away, the ancient Babylonians also recorded with trembling hands in the Epic of Gilgamesh that heaven came close to the earth, all mankind was destroyed within a single day. Even the mountains vanished beneath the water. And that is still not the end of the coincidence. Cross the ocean to the other side of the hemisphere, and the ancient Maya text Chimalpopoca also describes similarly terrifying scenes. The flood came with storms, and in a single night it submerged all plains and hills. Only those who fled to the highest peaks could survive. That same fear, that same scenario, appears again in the Sumerian Eridu Genesis. They wrote of a terror so unbearable that people fled desperately toward the mountains without daring to look back. Even in the distant east, in China's Book of Documents and Huainanzi, the memories of a catastrophic flood and the struggle for survival associated with Nuwa or Yu the Great are no different. It seems that from Europe, Asia, and the islands of the Pacific to indigenous tribes across the Americas, people all carried in their memory a prehistoric great flood that swept away the earth and forced civilization to begin again. If the flood myth were only folklore, only a random coincidence, then what do more than 600 records of a prehistoric great flood actually explain? This no longer seems like mere myth or legend. It seems much more like historical reality. When modern scientists speak of global catastrophes, they often point to the Younger Dryas event nearly 13,000 years ago. But Chan Thomas, as early as the 1960s, stood alone in proposing a different timeline, a number that ran completely against the textbooks of his day. The last great flood happened only about 6,500 to 7,000 years ago. Strangely enough, this is also the very starting point of the current civilization described in the book of Genesis. At the time, the world called Thomas a dreamer. Quite simply, there was not a single piece of physical evidence supporting him. But look at how time has answered. In 2000, archaeologists were stunned by the discovery of evidence of a devastating flood in the Black Sea. And then came the peak moment in 2016 when a Chinese geological team unearthed undeniable evidence of a catastrophic flood in Qinghai province, matching the era of Yu the Great's flood control almost exactly. All of these discoveries point directly to the 7,000-year mark that Thomas had predicted half a century earlier. But Thomas did not stop there. It was as though he was redrawing a timeline of extinctions. He pointed to a flood 15,000 years ago, a flood that submerged the Bering Strait 18,500 years ago, and farther back still to 29,000 years ago, 43,800 years ago. Each date marked the end of a civilization that had once flourished on Earth. At this point, mainstream science began to grow deeply uneasy. They could accept that the Earth had experienced floods, but they absolutely could not accept that humanity had once reached high levels of civilization and then been wiped out again and again. Why? Because if Thomas was right, then Darwin's theory of evolution would collapse like a castle of sand. According to mainstream science, life needed millions of years to evolve slowly, and the first civilization appeared in Mesopotamia only 6,500 years ago. But according to Thomas, humanity appeared developed and vanished like flashes of lightning within only a few thousand years. There was no time for slow evolution. There was no room for gradual progress. That is precisely why they had to label his theory pseudoscience and a conspiracy theory in order to protect their tower of knowledge. They chose to black out what they could not explain, and yet, truth always finds a way to speak. Across this planet, there are still ruins and so-called out-of-place artifacts, quietly supporting Chan Thomas's hypothesis. What kind of evidence could be so terrifying that even the CIA would not want you to know it existed? What exactly are those things? To answer that question, we must travel to one of the strangest regions on Earth, a place where the scars of the planet have still never fully healed the Columbia Plateau. Imagine a vast land, but instead of ordinary grasslands or forests, it bears the appearance of a battlefield left behind after destruction on a cosmic scale. This is the very place that geologist J. Harlan Bretz devoted his life to decoding. When Bretz first set foot there, he was stunned by what appeared before his eyes. On this plateau, he found hundreds of gigantic dry waterfalls, ghosts of the past, each one 5 to 10 times larger than the legendary Niagara Falls. And that was not all. There were deep canyons marked by violent water scars, rough and uneven riverbeds, and enormous granite boulders weighing hundreds of tons scattered aimlessly across the land, as if they had just been hurled there by a giant hand. After 6 full months of relentless research, Bretz arrived at a conclusion that at the time was nothing less than a declaration of war against the scientific establishment. In 1923, he declared that this entire strange landscape had not been formed by slow erosion over millions of years, but by the result of a catastrophic and sudden great flood. In 1927, when Bretz presented this report to American geological authorities, he had no idea that he had just touched the same forbidden truth that Chan Thomas would later pay for by having his record completely blacked out. But the scientific establishment of that time was not easily convinced. They posed a fatal question to Bretz. Where did the water come from? To create a landscape this devastating, you would need an entire ocean crashing down. So where was that ocean? At the time, Bretz fell silent. He had evidence of the destruction, but he lacked the culprit that had caused it. As a result, a merciless campaign of public and academic condemnation followed. Leading experts mocked him as a hopeless dreamer, accusing him of trying to smuggle the myth of Noah's Ark into science in order to profane the truth. They treated his theory as a step backward for humanity. Sadly, John Thomas was only 7 years old at the time. Had Thomas come of age earlier, his theory of Earth crust displacement might have fully explained the origin of that flood. The water did not appear out of nowhere, but was brought inland from the oceans when the poles shifted position. If that missing piece had existed, then Bretz might not have endured half a century of isolation and ridicule. And yet, Bretz was a resilient fighter. He pushed back for decades, even though he was forced to make concessions under worldly pressure, dividing the Great Flood from one single event into 7 separate erosional floods, so that the scientific community might find it easier to accept. In the end, justice finally came. In 1979, at the age of 96, the Geological Society of America awarded him the Penrose Medal, its highest honor as a belated apology for the truth he had defended all his life. But the evidence of water's fury is not found only in America. Fly across the ocean to the heart of Africa, where there stands a structure so strange that its full form can only be seen from space, the Richat structure, also known as the Eye of the Sahara. There, researchers discovered enormous wave-like formations surrounding the eye. These are not ordinary sand ripples shaped by the wind, but rolling hills rising as high as 15 meters and stretching into the distance. Geologists call them the fingerprints of the flood. They stand as powerful evidence that this entire barren desert was once submerged beneath an immense mass of water, churning with terrifying force before it withdrew, leaving behind an empty eye in the middle of the sand. At this point, the world began to admit that the Great Flood was real. But the most painful question still remained. If water once erased everything, then before that, could there have been advanced civilizations that we have completely forgotten? If these great floods were real, then where did the giants and the glorious empires mentioned in ancient texts go? Could it be that beneath the deep oceans we see today, there were once vast lands that sheltered civilizations far beyond the imagination of modern humanity? In the 19th century, an ambitious archaeological explorer named Augustus Le Plongeon devoted his life to decoding the mysterious messages left behind by the Maya, and what he found shocked the archaeological world. These ancient texts did not speak only of gods, but also described the existence of a gigantic supercontinent that had once ruled the heart of the Pacific Ocean. Le Plongeon called it the continent of Mu. Just consider its staggering scale as recorded in ancient accounts. It began south of the border of Tahiti, stretched northward to Hawaii, reached Easter Island in the east, and extended to the Mariana Islands in the west. With a length of 8,000 kilometers and a width of 5,000 kilometers, the area of this lost kingdom was equal to the combined size of North and South America. But how could such a magnificent land simply vanish from the map of the world without leaving behind any officially recognized trace? The answer once again brings us back to the ghost of those great floods that the CIA was accused of concealing. In the late 19th century, a British Army officer named James Churchward, while stationed in India, reportedly came into contact with a historical treasure, the ancient Nakal tablets. Strictly guarded by the abbot of a Hindu temple, this script was said to be so mysterious that no one could decipher it. Only through the guidance of a high-ranking monk did Churchward come to a shocking realization: these symbols were telling the full story of the rise and destruction of a great civilization, a powerful piece of support for what Le Plongeon had once claimed. According to what was recorded in Maya writings and the Nakal tablets, the continent of Mu was not merely a landmass, but the empire of the Mother Sun. There, the supreme ruler was honored with the title Ra, a symbol of the blazing sun. This was a super city ahead of its time, with canal systems and straight stone roads running through its cities. It was said that the walls in the capital were plated with shining gold reflecting the sunlight and creating a scene of breathtaking splendor. And yet that prosperity ended in the darkest possible scenario. Not through war, but through the fury of the earth itself. Supervolcanoes awakening all at once, earthquakes tearing the continent apart, and violent movements of the earth's crust dragging the entire Sun Empire into the abyss of the ocean. But could such a glorious civilization truly disappear without a trace? And could humanity still find the ruins of the continent of Mu? There is an underwater structure near Yonaguni Island in Japan that resembles a pyramid. It is called the Yonaguni Monument. Japanese marine geologist Masaki Kimura believes it is a man-made structure that sank to the seafloor. He proposed that this underwater pyramid belonged to the lost legendary continent of Mu. Nan Madol in Micronesia is believed by some to have once been part of the southern region of the continent of Mu. There are 98 artificial islands there, filled with architectural structures made from enormous volcanic basalt columns. To this day, no one can fully explain who built these structures or how they were built. In recent years, researchers using the latest airborne laser radar scans, or LiDAR, discovered that Nan Madol once had an artificial irrigation system capable of supplying fresh water to the people living throughout the area. This suggests that it was also a highly developed society. On Easter Island, which is considered by some to have been the eastern part of the continent of Mu, archaeologists have also made astonishing discoveries. People already know that there are many giant Moai stone statues on Easter Island. New excavations have revealed that the Moai statues are even larger than we once thought because the lower halves of their bodies are buried deep underground. This raises a new question. Why were they designed that way? To end up in their present form, the builders would first have needed to dig a deep pit in the ground, place a stone statue about 9 meters tall and weighing 80 tons into it, and then fill the pit back in, burying the lower half of the statue firmly beneath the earth. Why would they do that? If they knew the lower half of the statue would be buried, then why carve it so carefully? Was it meant so that future generations upon digging it up would be given a surprising discovery? And if the builders did not intentionally do this, then another possibility appears. The statues were originally placed on the ground as full-body monuments. But over the course of long history, no one knows when they were gradually buried by sand and earth until they came to appear as they do today. According to research, more than 12,000 people once lived on the tiny island of Easter Island. Where did these people come from? Mainstream anthropologists believe they may have come from Polynesia, venturing out across the vast ocean in wooden boats and eventually finding the island. However, if the continent of Mu once existed, then the explanation becomes much simpler. They would have only needed to walk across. In addition, there are also giant stone arches on Tongatapu Island, enormous stone money on Yap Island, and altar platforms on the Tuamotu Islands that resemble the pyramids of the Maya. The ruins on these remote islands show striking similarities, and each island has a legend about a great island that sank beneath the sea. Why is that? If they all once belonged to the same great island, then everything becomes much easier to explain. According to ancient records, at the height of its power, the Empire of Mu had 3 major routes extending to different parts of the world in order to establish colonial settlements. Its influence spread across Asia, Europe, Africa, and the Americas. This would explain the similarities between the Polynesians and the Greeks, and why the inhabitants of Easter Island worshipped a sun god named Ra. That is the same as Ra, the sun god, in ancient Egyptian civilization. Not only that, some scholars have also found similarities among the gods of ancient civilizations in Greece, Egypt, and even India. There are also many relics in the Americas that record the existence of the continent of Mu. For example, archaeologists once excavated more than 2,600 stone tablets in a small town 8 kilometers north of Mexico City. The inscription on tablet number 684 reads, "This temple was built on the reclaimed land of the continent of Mu, in accordance with the will of Ra, spokesman of the protecting god, our great king, to protect the envoys of the Western Empire of the Sun." There is a ruined temple at Uxmal on Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, and its inscription reads, "In memory of the place from which we came, the western continent Mu. There is also an inscription at the famous pyramid of Teotihuacan, southwest of Mexico City, stating that the pyramid was built in memory of the lost western continent Mu. In the book, Thomas presents several powerful pieces of evidence supporting the theory of cyclical catastrophes. He also gives reasons for why cyclical catastrophes occur and when the next pole shift will take place. The inscriptions carved into stone in Mexico and Yucatan are not merely nostalgic memories of a lost homeland. They are the final pieces confirming that the continent of Mu was not a myth, but the victim of one of the most terrifying cycles of destruction on Earth. But what could possibly have had enough power to sink an entire supercontinent of that size in a single night? In the book sealed by the CIA Chan, Thomas did not simply tell a story. He claimed to decode this machine of destruction with hard mathematical evidence. According to Thomas, catastrophe is not random. It is an unavoidable cycle of the universe. He argued that just like the Earth's elliptical orbit, everything moving through space has deadly drop points. After a certain interval, our planet passes through an extremely dangerous zero magnetic field zone. This is the moment when the lock holding the planet stable is broken, turning the molten layer beneath the crust we stand on into a kind of lubricating oil, causing the entire surface of the Earth to slip into chaos. And based on the mysterious elliptical patterns of the universe, Thomas calculated that the cycles of civilizations are not fixed. Some last 4,500 years, others continue for 7,000 years. But the most frightening part was his prediction. In 1993, the next pole shift, our ending, would occur sometime between the year 2000 and the year 2193. You may feel relieved if you think mainstream science did not believe Thomas. Do not celebrate too soon. Conventional scientists believe that a magnetic pole reversal happens on average once every 300,000 years. But the truth is, this 800,000 years have already passed since the last pole reversal. By both Thomas's mathematics and mainstream scientific data, we are now in the final moments of a cycle, and reality seems to be pointing in that direction. Since the early 1990s, the North Pole has drifted 16 kilometers per year. But now that speed has jumped to 64 kilometers per year. GPS update cycles have had to be shortened from once every 5 years to once every 6 months just to keep up with the disorder. The Earth's magnetic field is weakening rapidly, an undeniable sign that the Earth's crust is preparing for a fateful slip. What will happen as we draw closer to the breaking point? The atmosphere will no longer be a shield. Magnetic chaos will cripple GPS satellites and the global power grid. Solar storms will sweep across the planet like the flames of death, burning satellites and plunging the world into darkness for months. This calls to mind the chilling prophecies of Brandon Biggs, the visions of nuns from the last century, and the testimonies of people who have had near-death experiences. All of them saw a common scene: the world plunged into darkness. The massive earthquakes and tsunamis, warned of by the artist Long Shuliang and the psychic Parker, also align in a strangely compelling way with Chan Thomas's mechanism of polar shifting. But is this truly the absolute end? Chan Thomas, who claimed to have had contact with extraterrestrial civilizations, left behind a glimmer of hope. He said that when catastrophe comes, angels or higher order beings will appear to receive those whose awareness and moral character remain pure. Just as Brandon Biggs also said, the Creator will descend. And for those who hold firmly to faith and righteous thoughts, the end of the world is not the end at all, but a purification before the beginning of a new age. Looking back on the entire journey of the Adam and Eve story, we can finally understand why the CIA went to such lengths to hide it for half a century. This book was not merely a dry geological document. It was an invisible yet incredibly powerful thread connecting to truths buried within ancient texts. What Chan Thomas described about the shifting of the Earth's crust and cyclical great floods was in essence a forceful confirmation of humanity's oldest written records. First, it compels us to look at the book of Genesis through an entirely different lens. Noah's flood is no longer a distant legend, meant only to warn the faithful, but appears instead as a terrifying memory. A vivid geological report of the most recent pole shift our planet has endured. And the parallels do not stop there. If you turn the pages of the Book of Enoch, you will find strange descriptions of cosmic disorder and the distortion of the heavens before the day of judgment. Those prophetic images, strangely enough, align closely with the rupture and chaos of the Earth's magnetic field as the poles begin to slip, just as Thomas tried to calculate through mathematics. Even in the banned Gnostic texts, we find something eerily similar. There are accounts of a humanity that once reached a high level of awareness only to be wiped out in a great purification in order to cleanse the soul. All of these scattered pieces, from religion and spirituality to classified CYA records, seem to be converging on one point: the truth of a cycle of destruction that humanity cannot escape. And the fact that the CIA declassified this book in 2013, at the very moment when the Earth's magnetic field was weakening at a record pace, may not have been a coincidence at all. It may have been a quiet reminder that modern science, after thousands of years of denial, is finally being forced to bow before ancient prophecy. Perhaps the truth does not lie in modern laboratories, but in the human heart itself, and in those blacked-out ancient lines. Prepare yourself with a steady mind and a pure moral character. Because when the clock of the universe strikes its final beat, only faith and righteous thoughts will be the ticket that carries us through the doorway into a new age. And remember, John Thomas's book is only the first name on the CIA's blacklist. The secrets surrounding the Bible grow even more shocking as we move to the second book. The Mars records the war between the stars and the fallen watchers. If Chan Thomas's book made you fear the geological catastrophes beneath the Earth, then this second file takes that fear to an entirely new level: outer space and the manipulation of the soul. We often read in the Bible the words of Jesus, "My kingdom is not of this world." Until now, we have believed that to mean a distant, invisible, heavenly realm. In his letter to the Ephesians, St. Paul warned, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places." Pause for a moment. Who are these spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms? Could it be that the kingdoms or the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms mentioned in the Bible are actually multi-dimensional civilizations operating right above us on nearby planets such as Mars? Some researchers even suspect something more unsettling, that they are not simply remaining there, but are directly interfering in the destiny of humanity through the darkest government projects. To understand why the CIA was so afraid of this file, we have to begin with a man whose memories were stolen. That man was the husband of Stephanie Relf, a therapist and the author of the second book, The Mars Records, which we will explore in today's video. Stephanie Relf was born in Sydney, Australia, and earned a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Sydney, majoring in zoology and histology. Her main professional work has been as a professional kinesiologist since 1993. She used muscle testing to diagnose and treat health and psychological problems. She married Michael Relf, the central figure in the Mars Records, and together they had one son. In the early 2000s, Michael Relf and his wife Stephanie caused a stir when they decided to publish what they believed was a sealed truth. It is important to note that Michael was not a writer. He was a veteran, a technical specialist who had served in the United States military. However, he claimed that his memories had been frozen by sophisticated CIA mind erasure techniques. But there is one thing that even the most advanced mind erasure methods cannot touch: the memory of the cells. At that point, Stephanie Relf's expertise in zoology and kinesiology became the only weapon capable of turning the tide. Through muscle testing and mind-clearing therapies, she persevered for years to help her husband unlock the layers of sealed memory, bringing terrifying truths out of the shadows and into the light. That entire suffocating struggle was eventually organized into a historical case file. Specifically, the Mars Records is a collection of raw technical reports and therapy journals divided into 2 volumes with enough weight to shake every ordinary belief. In Volume 1, we enter a world of impossible technology. Using her kinesiology expertise, Stephanie helped Michael break through the ice surrounding his memories and expose the 20 and Back project. Michael described in detail how he was recruited the use of jump gates, and especially the technology of time bending. It allowed a soldier to serve for 20 years at underground bases on Mars. But once the mission ended, he would be sent back to the exact moment he had left Earth, a mechanism that left ordinary reality unchanged and allowed the project to remain in total darkness. Then, in Volume 2, the content becomes even more shocking as it goes deeper into the nature of the entities Michael claimed to have encountered. This is no longer science fiction, but a true spiritual war. Michael exposes the appearance of the rulers of this dark world, the reptilians and the Greys. He claimed that they are the fallen watchers, using devices of spiritual parasitism to control human energy and souls directly from outer space. And yet, only a short time after the first manuscript pages were widely published on the internet and caused an uproar in research circles, the sword of power came down. The book was swiftly banned and withdrawn. Why would the CIA fear a kinesiologist and a veteran like this? The reason was not merely that they exposed bases on another planet. It was because the Mars Records had inadvertently uncovered the true weak point of the intelligence agencies. The most sophisticated techniques of mind control, the dark continuation of Project MK Ultra. They feared that if humanity ever learned how these powers in the heavens manipulate the mind, then the empire of deception would collapse. So what exactly did Michael see inside those underground bases on Mars that made them work so hard to erase his mind? In Volume 1 of the Mars Records, Michael Relf describes his first day setting foot on Mars not through a massive spacecraft like the ones we usually see associated with NASA. Instead, he says he went through a horrifying experience in which his body was torn apart and reassembled within seconds through jump gates, instantaneous transport portals located at ultra-secret underground military bases on Earth. When the blinding stream of light suddenly vanished, Michael realized he was no longer at the familiar military base, but standing inside a cold, metallic complex buried miles beneath the red and barren surface of Mars. There, the atmosphere was not thin or toxic as science has long claimed. Michael says these bases possess technology so advanced in atmospheric regeneration and artificial gravity that he was able to function as if he were back at home. But that sense of comfort was quickly replaced by dread when he saw his co-workers. They were not only human, but included extraterrestrial beings operating giant computer systems alongside them. Michael was assigned to the Telecommunications Engineering Division, but his real job was maintaining control and surveillance systems. He soon realized that the ultimate purpose of the base was not scientific research, but the establishment of a strategic military outpost. From there, they could observe every activity on Earth without being detected, while also conducting genetic and technological experiments that Earth's moral laws would never allow. But the most shocking thing Michael reveals in Volume 1 is the operating mechanism behind the 20 and Back project. He describes a stolen life he was forced to sign slave-like contracts, lasting exactly 20 years. During those 2 decades, Michael grew older, endured brutal training, and witnessed horrifying secrets of the Human-Alien Alliance. And yet, when the 20-year term ended, instead of being discharged, he was taken into a process called age regression. Using a medical technology far beyond ordinary understanding, Michael's entire body was rewound back in time to the condition of a 20-year-old man, exactly as he had been on the day he first enlisted. And that was when the cruelty reached its peak. The CIA used mind-erasing technology to wipe away every memory of Mars, then sent him back to Earth through a transport gate at the exact moment he had supposedly left 20 years earlier. The Michael living in ordinary reality continued a normal life. Got married, had a child, and never knew that his soul had once wandered and fought for 20 years on another planet. Only when Stephanie's therapies touched what she called cell memory Did the fragments of red skies and deep metallic corridors beneath the surface of Mars begin to return, tearing apart the veil of deception the CIA had worked so hard to build? If the time-bending technology and underground bases in Volume 1 have already left you stunned, then prepare yourself. Because in Volume 2, Michael claims he will reveal the true identity of those giving orders to the military commanders on Mars. We will no longer be talking about machines or transport gates, but about reptilian beings and the way they are feeding on the human soul. Are you ready to learn why the Bible calls them the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms? As we turn the pages of Volume 2, Michael Relf brings us face to face with a terrifying truth. His superiors at the Mars base were not entirely human. He describes a rigid hierarchy run by reptilian beings and greys, but be careful not to confuse them with the aliens of Hollywood films. Michael makes a sharp argument that connects directly to the Bible. These entities are the fallen watchers, evil beings cast out from the heavenly realm who are still trying to establish a kingdom of darkness in the heavenly places, that is the space surrounding the earth. Why would the CIA be so afraid of this information? Because Michael claims that the world's leading intelligence agencies are not in conflict with these entities at all. On the contrary, they are part of a dark, symbiotic alliance. Human beings provide resources, underground bases, and test subjects, soldiers like Michael himself. And in return, these entities provide technology and methods of mass control that no human government could ever create on its own. The most dramatic and controversial revelation in Volume 2 is the disclosure of what Michael calls spiritual parasitic devices. He claims these beings do not merely invade territory, they invade the soul itself. Through multidimensional technologies far beyond our understanding, they implant energy objects into the subtle body of human beings. These devices function like transmitting and receiving stations, draining life energy and steering our thoughts toward negativity, fear, and submission. Michael presents this as the answer to why the modern world is so full of chaos and hatred, because that is the ideal energetic environment for these entities to survive and rule. Michael Relf makes a deeply unsettling argument. The mind erasure program he experienced was not only meant to protect military secrets, but also to conceal the fact that his soul had been contaminated by these parasites. The CIA and the powers in the heavens fear that if humanity ever realizes it possesses an immortal and powerful soul, people would begin to free themselves from manipulation. And yet, Volume 2 does not end in despair. Michael and Stephanie Relf devote the final chapters to pointing toward a way of escape. He insists that no matter how great the power of these spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms may be, they cannot overcome free will and genuine faith. By recovering his memories, Michael believed he had proven that truth has the power to cleanse the soul. He emphasizes that those who remain morally steadfast, stay connected to the Creator, and refuse to let fear rule them, will generate a shield of energy that no parasitic device can penetrate. But can we dismiss everything Michael Relf said as nothing more than the product of a damaged imagination? If he had been alone, perhaps the CIA would not have had so much reason to worry. The truth is, Michael Relf was not alone. Over the past decades, a wave of whistleblowers from the highest levels of the American military and scientific world have broken their silence. They were top specialists, people who once held top-secret clearance at places such as Area 51 and Dulce. Their reports did not only align with Michael's claims about the existence of extraterrestrial technology, they also echoed a far more disturbing detail, that they had actually worked alongside Greys and reptilian entities. Think of Phil Schneider, a geological engineer who claimed to have helped build deep underground military bases, or DUMBs. Before his death under highly suspicious circumstances, Schneider publicly described a bloody clash in 1979 between United States Special Forces and Grey entities beneath the ground. He claimed that the United States government had signed dark treaties trading human freedom for off-world technology. Or take Bob Lazar, the man who first brought Area 51 into public view. He described in detail how he studied anti-gravity propulsion systems from craft that he said that he said were not made by human beings. And most recently, statements made by former intelligence officer David Grush before the United States Congress once again brought this issue into the open. We are in possession of vehicles of non-human origin, and there have been efforts to conceal that truth for nearly a century. But all the confessions of American engineers and intelligence officers were still nothing compared to the earthquake that erupted on December 4th, 2020. A figure of enormous influence decided to step into the light. Haim Eshed, the man often called the father of Israel's space program. At the age of 87, this former head of space security dropped a bombshell in the national newspaper, Yediot Aharonot. He stated plainly that extraterrestrials truly exist and that they have formed a close alliance with humanity. Eshed even revealed a shocking detail about former United States President Donald Trump. He said that President Trump not only knew about this presence, but had once intended to disclose the full truth to humanity. However, that plan was stopped by representatives of the Galactic Federation. The reason? They believed that humanity was not yet ready and needed more time to evolve in awareness before facing this reality. Eshed's words were not presented as baseless speculation. He reached back into the dark history of United States presidents to support his claim. Beginning in the 1940s, President Truman was said to have personally seen squadrons of flying saucers over the skies of Washington. Then in the 1960s, there were rumors that President Nixon once took a close friend to see alien bodies at the legendary Hangar 18. Most striking of all was the confirmation from Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, granddaughter of President Eisenhower. She publicly acknowledged that her grandfather had signed a shocking agreement allowing extraterrestrials to build secret bases at Area 51 in exchange for anti-gravity technology and advanced physics. Eshed claimed that extraterrestrials are not interested only in Earth. They have also established enormous bases deep beneath the crust of Mars. Their American astronauts, and possibly even personnel from Russia, Japan, Britain, and China, are quietly cooperating with them on joint development projects. This would explain why in December 2019, the United States government suddenly announced the creation of the Space Force. Could it be that the American military was not merely flexing its strength against empty space, but preparing for an off-world military reality? Even more astonishing, it is said that not only the military, but also the United Nations and the Roman Church are fully aware of the existence of 9 extraterrestrial races within this federation. The Church, it is even claimed, would be ready to baptize them if they wish to convert. But the most painful question remains, what exactly are the extraterrestrials' experiments on Earth? Are they helping us, or are they turning humanity into livestock inside an intergalactic laboratory? Mr. Eshed told people that the extraterrestrials explained it to him directly in this way. They said, although our technology is far more advanced than yours, this vast universe is still a mystery to us. We are exploring it because we want to understand the full structure of the universe. Earth is a very special existence in the universe. This small planet has all kinds of things that other planets do not have, such as abundant water, diverse plant and animal life, and even oceans. So we want to use Earth to see the greater through the smaller in order to understand the universe. To us, Earth is like a scientist's petri dish. A petri dish is the small round glass dish often used in high school lab classes. We use it to culture cells, bacteria, or microorganisms. But if Earth is the extraterrestrials' petri dish, then what role do we humans play in it? Are we the bacteria? Or are we the microorganism? Mr. Eshed said, do not be nervous. Their experiment has not yet begun because their petri dish, Earth, is still not stable enough. And this is also one of the reasons the extraterrestrials do not want to reveal themselves too soon. They said that once they reveal themselves, it would trigger massive panic, leading to market collapse, food shortages, hospital shutdowns, and negative forces hidden in the shadows taking the opportunity to rise up. If things are not handled carefully, the end of humanity could arrive. And of course, Earth itself would no longer remain stable. And if Earth is unstable, then their experiment cannot move forward. That is not what they want to see. So they sent representatives to warn President Trump that now is not the time and that he should not rush to disclose our existence. But if that is what they say openly, Then why do they secretly keep appearing and showing off their presence? Ever since the Roswell crash in 1947, a wave of UFO sightings has erupted across the world. Different kinds of flying saucers have appeared openly displaying their power. The extraterrestrials said we also act this way out of necessity. Because the 2 atomic bombs dropped on Japan truly frightened us. People on Earth may not have immediately understood the destructive power of nuclear weapons. But the extraterrestrials understood it very clearly because they have experience. As we have mentioned before, some extraterrestrials are said to have lost their own worlds because of nuclear war. Both sides kept attacking each other until they destroyed their own planet, making it uninhabitable. So they had no choice but to go out in search of other planets that could sustain life. Could the extraterrestrials who want to carry out experiments on Earth also have come here for the same reason? Could their so-called experiment actually be preparation for migration, or in other words, an invasion of Earth? At present, we still do not know. However, if one's own homeland were still livable, who would truly want to leave it behind and wander from place to place? That seems only reasonable, does it not? The extraterrestrials clearly do not want the people of Earth to end up taking the same road. Otherwise, the habitable planet they struggled so hard to find would also have to be abandoned. So they have tried their best to stop the people of Earth from developing nuclear weapons. Their occasional appearances and displays of power are part of that strategy, a warning to humanity that there are civilizations in this world far more advanced than you are. You would be wise not to act recklessly, because if you do, the extraterrestrials will become very angry and the consequences will be severe. So the ones working to preserve peace on Earth are not only the United States as the world's police, but also the extraterrestrials. At this point, Mr. Esched gave an example. During the Cold War in the 1960s, the missile crisis took place between the United States and Cuba, nearly triggering the Third World War. Cuba, as a small country, obviously could not confront the United States on its own. In reality, it was acting as the Soviet Union's representative in the Americas. Mr. Esched said that during that crisis, the Soviets nearly used nuclear weapons, but at the critical moment, they were stopped by extraterrestrials. Of course, whether their purpose in preserving peace is for their own sake or for Earth's sake is another question. Are they protecting Earth so that one day they can claim it for themselves? Or is it entirely out of goodwill and a desire to help humanity? Only they know that. So then, what kinds of extraterrestrials have come to Earth? The space warping technology of the little grays. According to Mr. Esched's revelations, scientists have discovered dozens of extraterrestrial races of every strange form imaginable. Some of them are even said to have the ability to shapeshift in order to blend in with humanity. But the race that is closest to us, and mentioned most often, is the little grays, thin beings with large heads and deep black eyes, the very image we often see in films. Mr. Esched speculates that some of them come from the Pleiades star cluster. Keep in mind that this cluster is 444 light-years away from Earth, an unimaginable distance for human civilization. But for the Greys, that number is only a simple calculation, because they possess ships of a scale and technological sophistication far beyond the ordinary laws of physics. Their motherships are immense, as large as a small city, and serve as mobile bases moving between galaxies. The flying saucers, or UFOs, that we usually see are only smaller craft launched from those motherships, most of them operated by highly precise, intelligent robots. So the question is this: how do they exceed the speed of light? Are their engines powered by rockets or nuclear energy? Mr. Esched insists that the answer is neither. We must abandon old ways of thinking in order to approach a breakthrough concept. Instead of moving the body to its destination, they make space-time itself move to them. Imagine an ant standing on the left edge of a giant sheet of paper, with its destination on the right edge, dozens of light years away. If it crawls normally, the ant would die of old age before covering even a millionth of the distance. But this is a super-powered ant. Instead of crawling, it simply whispers a magic formula, causing the sheet of paper to bend and fold until both ends touch. The ant only needs to take a single gentle step, and it has already reached its destination. Then the paper springs back to its original shape. The ant has not changed. The paper has not changed. Only its position has shifted by dozens of light years in an instant. But extraterrestrials are different. They do not use a magic formula like the ant. They use dark matter. This is the form of matter that makes up as much as 25% of the universe, yet human beings cannot see it or touch it. Extraterrestrials have mastered the ability to control it in order to warp space-time and even create microscopic black holes to serve as shortcuts for traveling across galaxies instantly. They believe that the entire universe is built on purely mathematical patterns. To them, once the mathematical structure is decoded, everything can be controlled through technology. Because they trust calculations so completely, they do not believe in divine beings and have no faith of any kind. And yet, there is one miraculous thing before which all of their technology is powerless: human consciousness. Mr. Eshed explains that everything in the universe is made of energy, including us. When death occurs, we do not disappear at all, but are simply transformed into another form of energy, the energy of consciousness. Consciousness is immortal. It is like a vast storage network of the universe, where every personality and every experience you have is preserved forever. In reality, the true core of the universe is not cold mathematical numbers, but our consciousness itself. Modern biologists may regard this as fantasy, but Mr. Eshed believed that the great scientist Stephen Hawking understood this very well. Mr. Eshed's interview ended in a calculated sense of incompleteness. The most essential questions of all: what exactly is their experiment on Earth? Does it harm us? What technology have the Americans managed to learn from them? What are they doing together beneath the surface of Mars? None of these questions received an answer. With more than 30 years of experience leading Israel's space program, Mr. Eshed understood perfectly well where the line stood between what could be said and what could never be revealed. After that one and only interview, this former 87-year-old official completely disappeared from the media. His sudden silence after such a shocking interview did not calm things down. On the contrary, it acted like a spark, forcing the great powers of the world to confront questions unlike anything they had ever faced before. But do not assume that Mr. Eshed was the only one willing to speak. Isaac Ben Israel, who was serving at the time as director of the Israel Space Agency, also stood fully behind his predecessor. He stated that although Mr. Eshed's speaking style could at times sound exaggerated, his seriousness and his standing in the aerospace field were beyond dispute. So in the end, do extraterrestrials exist or not? Ben Israel answered directly. Over the past decade, serious scientists have completely accepted this idea. I also believe the probability is very high. Do you see that? From the United States government to Israel, they did not reject him, and they did not denounce Mr. Eshed as a liar. They simply acknowledged it in silence. In fact, ever since President Trump returned to office, he has repeatedly called for the truth about extraterrestrials to be disclosed. But every time it has amounted to a great noise with very little result, leaving the public so frustrated they could grind their teeth. Could it be just as Mr. Eshed suggested, that the negotiations between the United States government and the Galactic Federation are still not finished? That they are still not ready to reveal themselves officially? Very well then, if they will not disclose it, we will go looking for the truth ourselves. And do not underestimate the power of internet researchers, because they uncovered what they called hard evidence on the CIA's own website. In the 1970s and 1980s, when the race for extraordinary mental abilities between the United States and the Soviet Union reached its peak, the CIA established Project Stargate. This was a program that brought together people said to possess unusual abilities in order to carry out astonishing experiments, such as invisibility, mind reading, and especially remote viewing. One operative was even said to have seen a base on the moon. And the most explosive thing uncovered online was a report declassified in the year 2000, documenting an experiment conducted on January 13, 1988. A psychic operative with the code name MR was given an assignment so specific it was almost unbelievable: remotely view the Galactic Federation headquarters. In his altered psychic state, MR found himself floating at an altitude of 1 mile in a dark expanse. He saw a mountain with sheer cliff walls rising high over a plateau, with a blue lake and broad grasslands below, a scene that called to mind Lake Titicaca in Peru. But the central focus of the report was a circular structure radiating brilliant columns of light. As he moved inside, MR passed through rough sloping passageways that led into a rectangular corridor with a towering ceiling and perfectly smooth walls. The feeling, he said, was very much like stepping into the interior of the pyramids of Egypt. At the end of the corridor was a domed chamber with the sacred atmosphere of a place of worship. There stood a large stone platform polished smooth like an altar. Around it were beings in white robes standing in a semicircle and gazing intently at the platform in the dim light. MR felt a strange familiarity, as though he had been there before. Immediately afterward, he saw himself lying on the stone platform, covered by a blinding stream of white light. A figure in a white robe stepped forward and slowly placed a hand on his abdomen. At that very moment, the experiment was interrupted. MR's consciousness returned to ordinary reality, and the report ended. Do you see the problem here? This experiment was like a writing assignment with a preset theme. The CIA instructed the operative to view the Galactic Federation headquarters. That means the CIA clearly knew, or at the very least firmly believed, that such an organization existed. Now look again at the evasive behavior of the White House, the silence of the Pentagon, and NASA's careful sidestepping. While NASA still appears to be searching for traces of bacteria on distant planets, the CIA had already, through psychic methods, quietly penetrated the headquarters of extraterrestrials decades ago. So if the Galactic Federation really is directing events from the shadows, then what is its ultimate goal for humanity? And could the experiment that MR saw on that stone platform have something to do with our bloodline and our true origin? The answer may be waiting for us in the third banned book, the one that speaks about the truth of bloodlines and the Nephilim giants. Are you ready to learn who we truly are in the eyes of these intergalactic neighbors? Banned book number 3, the Book of Jubilees. If Chan Thomas's polar shift and Haim Eshed's Mars bases made you shudder at the power of technology and cataclysm, then this third book reaches the deepest level of fear. It lies within your own body and your own bloodline. We often believe that the Bible is complete, but the truth is, what we have been allowed to read is only an edited version carefully cut down by ancient church councils. They deliberately remove the darkest chapters, the pages that expose the true origin of humanity. And one of the most dangerous of these banned books is the Book of Jubilees. The Book of Jubilees is not a modern work of speculative fiction. It is a precious ancient Jewish text believed by some to have been revealed directly to Moses on Mount Sinai, alongside the Book of Genesis. Yet in the 4th century AD, the Roman Church officially declared it apocrypha and banned its circulation. Why would a book regarded as the Word of God be so ruthlessly suppressed? This is where the conspiracy begins. There are suggestive declassified materials implying that intelligence organizations, such as the CIA, did not ignore the banned ancient books by accident. They recognized that the Book of Jubilees was not merely religious. It was a kind of genetic record, exposing a program of intervention into humanity by forces beyond the earth. The CIA borrowed the hand of the Church's conservatism to make sure this information would never reach the masses. They feared that if human beings learned the truth about their bloodline, the empire of mind control they had built, as described in the Mars records, would completely collapse. Because beneath its solemn religious teachings, the Book of Jubilees is in fact a top-secret file about a biological invasion that took place thousands of years ago. If the Book of Genesis is only a censored summary, then the Book of Jubilees is the most detailed and stripped-bare report of what really happened in the shadows of history. It does not stop at the story of Adam and Eve eating the forbidden fruit, but throws open the door to a far more horrifying catastrophe, the fall of the Watchers. Most striking of all, the Book of Jubilees gives a chilling perspective on why the Watchers appeared in the first place. They did not fall by accident. At the beginning, they were a company sent down to Earth with a noble mission to teach humanity justice and order. But once they came to this planet, the beings Haim Ishid described as the Galactic Federation recognized the terrifying potential within human genetic code. They were not merely captivated by outward beauty. In truth, they desired to possess and absorb our bloodline. Chapter 5 of the Book of Jubilees describes a massive betrayal of heaven. The Watchers deliberately broke the barrier between kinds and carried out an unnatural breeding program so vile that no words can fully express its horror. The result of that dreadful union was not ordinary children, but the Nephilim, a hybrid race, possessing strength and intelligence far beyond every human limit. The Book of Jubilees exposes a brutal reality. The Nephilim were not only immense in size, they also carried within them a savage, bloodthirsty nature that could not be restrained. They began devouring all the resources of the earth. When food ran out, they turned to animals, birds, and finally, to human beings themselves. But physical death was not the most terrifying part. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that the presence of the Nephilim completely corrupted the planet's genetic network. They taught humanity forbidden arts, from the making of destructive weapons to sorcery and the manipulation of energy. At that time, the Earth was no longer a garden of paradise. It had become a vast genetic laboratory where humanity was turned into slavery and our pure bloodline was mixed with the DNA of the fallen. This is the moment when we begin to understand why the CIA would want to bury the Book of Jubilees. This book insists that the Great Flood was not merely an outburst of nature. It was a campaign of biological eradication. The Creator was forced to press reset on the entire planet in order to wipe out the hybrid Nephilim beings and stop the spread of a mutated bloodline that was consuming the soul of humanity. Noah was chosen not only because he was righteous, but because he was the only man whose bloodline remained pure, untouched by the Watchers' experiments. And yet, the Book of Jubilees issues an even more terrifying warning. Although the bodies of the Nephilim were destroyed in the waters, their spirits, beings not of this realm, continued to exist as evil spirits. They continued to manipulate the most powerful bloodlines in the world from the shadows, waiting for the day of their return through the modern technological and genetic projects we see in our own time. To quote this accurately and give weight to the ending, you need a transition that affirms this is not speculation, but black and white wording preserved in the ancient manuscript itself. Below is the transition and a direct quotation from the Book of Jubilees, chapter 10, where the negotiation between the evil being Mastema and the Creator is described. This is not the insane theory of conspiracy writers, but a dark covenant clearly recorded in chapter 10 of the Book of Jubilees. As the angels prepared to imprison all the defiled spirits of the Nephilim, Mastema, the leader of the evil spirits, stepped forward with a horrifying request. The Book of Jubilees records Mastema's words as follows: "O Lord Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them listen to my voice, and do everything that I shall say to them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will upon the sons of men. For these are for corruption and leading astray before my judgment, for great is the wickedness of the sons of men." And that request was granted. The text continues, "And he said, let the 10th part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of judgment." Do you realize how terrifying this is? 1/10 of the force of the most violent hybrid beings in history was not destroyed. They were permitted to remain in order to carry out the will of Mastema. This explains why human history over thousands of years has remained filled with war, cruel genetic experiments, and the mind control projects we saw in the Mars records. They never disappeared. They simply hid themselves behind powerful bloodlines, behind CIA top-secret clearance cards, and silently waited for the moment of polar shift in order to rise and seize total control. But instead of hearing only my analysis, perhaps the best way for you to feel the weight of this truth is to face the original words for yourself. The very words that people have spent centuries trying to black out, cut apart, and bury beneath the dust of history. Now let us listen to the audiobook itself from this astonishing file. Listen carefully to every detail of how the Watchers established their order on earth, how Noah struggled to preserve the purity of the bloodline, and especially the prophecies concerning the rising of the full strength of darkness in our age. Every line you are about to hear is not only knowledge, but a code of awakening for your soul. Do you have the courage to listen to everything the hidden powers never wanted you to know? Chapter 4. And in the 3rd week in the 2nd Jubilee she gave birth to Cain, and in the 4th she gave birth to Abel. And in the 5th she gave birth to her daughter Awan. And in the 1st year of the 3rd Jubilee, Cain slew Abel, because God accepted the sacrifice of Abel, and did not accept the offering of Cain. And he slew him in the field, and his blood cried from the ground to heaven, complaining because he had slain him. And the Lord reproved Cain because of Abel, because he had slain him, and he made him a fugitive on the earth, because of the blood of his brother, and he cursed him upon the earth. And on this account it is written on the heavenly tables, "Cursed is he who smites his neighbor treacherously, and let all who have seen and heard say, so be it. And the man who has seen and not declared it, let him be accursed as the other." And for this reason we announce when we come before the Lord our God, all the sin which is committed in heaven and on earth and in light and in darkness and everywhere. And Adam and his wife mourned for Abel 4 weeks of years, and in the 4th year of the 5th week they became joyful. And Adam knew his wife again, and she bare him a son, and he called his name Seth. For he said, God has raised up a second seed unto us on the earth instead of Abel. For Cain slew him, and in the 6th week he begat his daughter Azurah. And Cain took Awan his sister to be his wife, and she bare him Enoch at the close of the 4th Jubilee. And in the 1st year of the 1st week of the 5th Jubilee, houses were built on the earth, and Cain built a city, and called its name after the name of his son Enoch. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she bare yet 9 sons. And in the 5th week of the 5th Jubilee, Seth took Azurah his sister to be his wife, and in the 4th year of the 6th week she bare him Enos. He began to call on the name of the Lord on the earth. And in the 7th Jubilee in the 3rd week, Enos took Noam his sister to be his wife, and she bare him a son in the 3rd year of the 5th week. And he called his name Kenan. And at the close of the 8th Jubilee, Kenan took Mualeleth his sister to be his wife, and she bare him a son in the 9th Jubilee. In the 1st week, in the 3rd year of this week, and he called his name Mahalalel. And in the 2nd week of the 10th Jubilee, Mahalalel took unto him to wife Dinah the daughter of Barachiel, the daughter of his father's brother, and she bare him a son in the 3rd week in the 6th year, and he called his name Jared, for in his days the angels of the Lord descended on the earth, those who are named the Watchers, that they should instruct the children of men, and that they should do judgment and uprightness on the earth. And in the 11th Jubilee, Jared took to himself a wife, and her name was Barakah, the daughter of Rasujal, a daughter of his father's brother in the 4th week of this Jubilee, and she bare him a son in the 5th week in the 4th year of the Jubilee, and he called his name Enoch. And he was the first among men that are born on earth, who learnt writing and knowledge and wisdom, and who wrote down the signs of heaven according to the order of their months in a book, that men might know the seasons of the years according to the order of their separate months. And he was the first to write a testimony. And he testified to the sons of men among the generations of the earth, and recounted the weeks of the Jubilees, and made known to them the days of the years, and set in order the months, and recounted the Sabbaths of the years, as we made them known to him. And what was and what will be, he saw in a vision of his sleep, as it will happen to the children of men throughout their generations, until the day of judgment. He saw and understood everything, and wrote his testimony, and placed the testimony on earth for all the children of men and for their generations. And in the 12th Jubilee, in the 7th week thereof, he took to himself a wife, and her name was Edna, the daughter of Danel, the daughter of his father's brother, and in the 6th year in this week she bare him a son, and he called his name Methuselah. And he was moreover with the angels of God these 6 Jubilees of years, and they showed him everything. which is on earth and in the heavens, the rule of the sun, and he wrote down everything. And he testified to the watchers who had sinned with the daughters of men. For these had begun to unite themselves so as to be defiled with the daughters of men, and Enoch testified against them all. And he was taken from amongst the children of men, and we conducted him into the Garden of Eden in majesty and honor. And behold, there he writes down the condemnation and judgment of the world, and all the wickedness of the children of men. And on account of it, God brought the waters of the flood upon all the land of Eden. For there he was set as a sign, and that he should testify against all the children of men, that he should recount all the deeds of the generations until the day of condemnation. And he burnt the incense of the sanctuary, even sweet spices acceptable before the Lord, on the mount. For the Lord has 4 places on the earth, the Garden of Eden and the Mount of the East. And this mountain on which thou art this day, Mount Sinai and Mount Zion, which will be sanctified in the new creation for a sanctification of the earth. Through it will the earth be sanctified from all its guilt and its uncleanness throughout the generations of the world. And in the 14th Jubilee, Methuselah took unto himself a wife, Edna, the daughter of Azriel, the daughter of his father's brother, in the 3rd week in the 1st year of this week. And he begat a son, and called his name Lamech. And in the 15th Jubilee in the 3rd week, Lamech took to himself a wife, and her name was Betanos, the daughter of Barachiel, the daughter of his father's brother. And in this week she bare him a son, and he called his name Noah, saying, This one will comfort me for my trouble and all my work, and for the ground which the Lord hath cursed. And at the close of the 19th Jubilee in the 7th week, in the 6th year thereof, Adam died, and all his sons buried him in the land of his creation, and he was the first to be buried in the earth. And he lacked 70 years of 1,000 years. For 1,000 years are as one day in the testimony of the heavens, and therefore was it written concerning the tree of knowledge, On the day that ye eat thereof, ye shall die. For this reason he did not complete the years of this day, for he died during it. At the close of this Jubilee, Cain was killed after him in the same year. For his house fell upon him, and he died in the midst of his house, and he was killed by its stones. For with a stone he had killed Abel, and by a stone was he killed in righteous judgment. For this reason it was ordained on the heavenly tablets, With the instrument with which a man kills his neighbor, with the same shall he be killed. After the manner that he wounded him, in like manner shall they deal with him. And in the 25th Jubilee, Noah took to himself a wife, and her name was Emzara, the daughter of Rachael, the daughter of his father's brother. In the 1st year, in the 5th week, and in the 3rd year thereof, she bare him Shem. In the 5th year thereof she bare him Ham, and in the 1st year, in the 6th week, she bare him Japheth. Chapter 5. And it came to pass, when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the angels of God saw them on a certain year of this Jubilee, that they were beautiful to look upon. And they took themselves wives of all whom they chose. And they bare unto them sons, and they were giants. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and all flesh corrupted its way, alike men, and cattle, and beasts, and birds, and everything that walks on the earth. All of them corrupted their ways and their orders, and they began to devour each other. And lawlessness increased on the earth, and every imagination of the thoughts of all men was thus evil continually. And God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. And all flesh had corrupted its orders, and all that were upon the earth had wrought all manner of evil before his eyes. And he said that he would destroy man and all flesh upon the face of the earth, which he had created. But Noah found grace before the eyes of the Lord. And against the angels whom he had sent upon the earth, he was exceedingly wroth, and he gave commandment to root them out of all their dominion. And he bade us to bind them in the depths of the earth, and behold, they are bound in the midst of them, and are kept separate. And against their sons went forth a command from before his face, that they should be smitten with the sword, and be removed from under heaven. And he said, My spirit shall not always abide on man. For they also are flesh, and their days shall be 120 years. And he sent his sword into their midst, that each should slay his neighbor. And they began to slay each other, till they all fell by the sword, and were destroyed from the earth. And their fathers were witnesses of their destruction, and after this they were bound in the depths of the earth forever, until the day of the great condemnation, when judgment is executed on all those who have corrupted their ways and their works before the Lord. And he destroyed all from their places, and there was not left one of them whom he judged not according to all their wickedness. And he made for all his works a new and righteous nature, so that they should not sin in their whole nature forever, but should be all righteous each in his kind always. And the judgment of all is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets in righteousness, even the judgment of all who depart from the path which is ordained for them to walk in. And if they walk not, therein judgment is written down for every creature and for every kind. And there is nothing in heaven, or on earth, or in light, or in darkness, or in Sheol, or in the depth, or in the place of darkness, which is not judged. And all their judgments are ordained and written and engraved. In regard to all he will judge the great according to his greatness, and the small according to his smallness, and each according to his way. And he is not one who will regard the person of any, nor is he one who will receive gifts, if he says that he will execute judgment on each, if one gave everything that is on the earth. He will not regard the gifts or the person of any, nor accept anything at his hands, for he is a righteous judge. And of the children of Israel it has been written and ordained, if they turn to him in righteousness, he will forgive all their transgressions and pardon all their sins. It is written and ordained that he will show mercy to all who turn from all their guilt once each year. And as for all those who corrupted their ways and their thoughts before the flood, no man's person was accepted, save that of Noah alone. For his person was accepted in behalf of his sons, whom God saved from the waters of the flood on his account. For his heart was righteous in all his ways, according as it was commanded regarding him, and he had not departed from aught that was ordained for him. And the Lord said that he would destroy everything which was upon the earth, both men and cattle and beasts and fowls of the air, and that which moveth on the earth. And he commanded Noah to make him an ark, that he might save himself from the waters of the flood. And Noah made the ark in all respects, as he commanded him, in the 27th Jubilee of years, in the 5th week, in the 5th year, on the new moon of the 1st month. And he entered in the 6th year thereof, in the 2nd month, on the new moon of the 2nd month, till the 16th. And he entered, and all that we brought to him, into the ark, and the Lord closed it from without on the 17th evening. And the Lord opened 7 floodgates of heaven, and the mouths of the fountains of the great deep, 7 mouths in number. And the floodgates began to pour down water from the heaven, 40 days and 40 nights, and the fountains of the deep also sent up waters, until the whole world was full of water. And the waters increased upon the earth, 15 cubits did the waters rise above all the high mountains, and the ark was lift up above the earth, and it moved upon the face of the waters. And the water prevailed on the face of the earth 5 months, 150 days. And the ark went and rested on the top of Lubar, one of the mountains of Ararat. And on the new moon, in the 4th month, the fountains of the great deep were closed, and the floodgates of heaven were restrained. And on the new moon of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the water began to descend into the deep below. And on the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen. And on the new moon of the 1st month, the earth became visible. And the waters disappeared from above the earth in the 5th week, in the 7th year thereof. And on the 17th day, in the 2nd month, the earth was dry. And on the 27th thereof, he opened the ark and sent forth from it beasts and cattle and birds and every moving thing. Thus God saw it all. When the dark secrets of Enoch and the Nephilim were laid bare, the corruption had reached the limit of heaven, and the patience of the Creator had officially come to an end. A terrifying sentence of cleansing was declared. The moment the door of Noah's ark slammed shut was the very moment the heavens collapsed and the earth broke apart. The great flood had officially begun, and God commanded Noah to make an ark that he might save himself from the waters of the flood. Noah made the ark in every detail as God had commanded him in the 27th Jubilee of years in the 5th week, in the 5th year on the new moon of the 1st month. He entered the ark in the 6th year thereof, in the 2nd month, from the new moon of the 2nd month until the 16th day. Then he entered, and all that we brought to him entered also into the ark. And on the 17th evening, the Lord closed it from without. And the Lord opened 7 floodgates of heaven, and the mouths of the fountains of the great deep, 7 mouths in number. The floodgates poured down water from heaven 40 days and 40 nights, and the fountains of the deep also sent up waters until the whole world was filled with water. The waters increased upon the earth, rising 15 cubits above the highest mountains. The ark was lifted up above the earth, and it moved upon the face of the waters. The waters prevailed upon the earth for 5 months, 150 days. Then the ark came to rest upon the top of Lubar, one of the mountains of Ararat. On the new moon of the 4th month, the fountains of the great deep were closed, and the floodgates of heaven were restrained. On the new moon of the 7th month, all the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the water began to descend into the deep below. On the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and on the new moon of the 1st month, the earth became visible. The waters disappeared from upon the earth in the 5th week of the 7th year thereof. And on the 17th day of the 2nd month, the earth was dry. And on the 27th day he opened the ark, and sent forth from it the beasts and the cattle and the birds, and every moving thing. On the new moon of the 3rd month, Noah went forth from the ark, and built an altar on that mountain. He made atonement for the earth, taking a kid, and making atonement by its blood, for all the guilt of the earth, for everything on it had been destroyed, except those in the ark with him. He placed the fat of the sacrifice on the altar, and also an ox, a goat, a sheep, kid salt, a turtle dove, and the young of a dove. He offered them as a burnt sacrifice upon the altar, pouring oil, sprinkling wine, and scattering frankincense over all, so that a pleasing fragrance rose before the Lord. The Lord smelled the sweet savor, and made a covenant with Noah that never again would there be a flood to destroy the earth. All the days of the earth, seed time and harvest, would not cease. Cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night, would not change their order nor cease forever. And God said, "Increase and multiply upon the earth, and be a blessing upon it. The fear and dread of you I will place upon everything on the earth and in the sea. Behold, I have given you all beasts, all winged things, everything that moves on the earth, and the fish in the waters, just as the green herbs, so I have given you all things to eat. But flesh with its life, that is its blood, you shall not eat. For the life of all flesh is in the blood, and I will require the blood of man at the hand of every beast, and at the hand of every man. Whoever sheds man's blood by man, shall his blood be shed, for in the image of God was man made." Noah and his sons swore that they would not eat blood, and he made a covenant before the Lord for all generations of the earth in that month. For this reason, God commanded Moses to make a covenant with the children of Israel in this month on Mount Sinai, sealed with blood, because of all the words of the covenant which the Lord made with them forever. This testimony was written that they should observe it continually, so as never to eat blood of beasts, birds, or cattle. Whoever eats blood will be rooted out from the land. This law is without end, for it is forever, that they may seek forgiveness through sacrifices and prayers continually before the Lord. God gave to Noah and his sons a sign that never again would there be a flood to destroy the earth. He set his bow in the clouds as a sign of the eternal covenant. For this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks each year in this month to renew the covenant. This festival had been observed in heaven from the day of creation until the days of Noah, 26 Jubilees and 5 weeks of years. Noah and his sons kept it for 7 Jubilees and 1 week of years until Noah's death. After his death, his sons abandoned it until the days of Abraham, when people again ate blood. But Abraham observed it, as did Isaac and Jacob. In the days of Moses, the children of Israel forgot it until it was celebrated again on Mount Sinai. The The Lord commanded that the children of Israel should keep this festival in all their generations 1 day in the year in this month. For it is both the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits, a double festival as written in the book of the first law. On the new moon of the first month, the 4th month, the 7th month, and the 10th month are days of remembrance, seasons in the 4 divisions of the year, written and ordained as a testimony forever. Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for all generations. On the new moon of the first month, he was commanded to make the ark, and on that day, the earth became dry. On the new moon of the 4th month, the fountains of the deep were closed. On the new moon of the 7th month, the mouths of the abysses of the earth were opened, and the waters descended. On the new moon of the 10th month, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah rejoiced. Thus these became memorial feasts, forever placed on the heavenly tablets. Each season contained 13 weeks, completing 52 weeks for the year, 364 days in all. There is to be no neglecting of this reckoning. Moses was commanded to tell Israel to observe the year according to this reckoning of 364 days, so that the feasts and seasons would not be disturbed. If they neglected this and followed another reckoning, all the feasts and Sabbaths would be disordered, and they would forget the order of the years, the new moons, and the Sabbaths. The book already lay written before the angel, and on the heavenly tablets the division of days was ordained, lest Israel forget the feasts of the covenant and follow the feasts of the Gentiles in error. For some would surely observe the moon, which comes 10 days too soon, each year disturbing the seasons. Because of this, unclean days would be taken as holy, and holy days as unclean. They would go astray regarding months, Sabbaths, feasts, and jubilees, and even eat blood with all flesh. After the great flood, when the savage waves finally receded, Noah's family stepped out of the ark, believing that the world had truly been cleansed of the hybrid bloodlines and the brutality of the Nephilim. They believed that the dawn of a pure new age had begun, and yet the nightmare had never truly ended. Hidden within the cracks of space and time, the evil entity known as Mastema, the leader of the fallen ones, had never disappeared. He stood there coldly watching the descendants of Noah multiply. And once again, he set a subtle trap to poison the souls of Noah's children. To understand why our world today is still manipulated by invisible hands, let us turn to chapter 10 of the book of Jubilees, the place where a dark covenant between Mastema and the Creator is recorded. An agreement that allowed darkness to remain and operate lawfully in the very midst of this world. Chapter 10. In the 3rd week of this Jubilee, the unclean demons began to lead astray the children of the sons of Noah to make them err and to destroy them. The sons of Noah came to their father and told him of the demons that were leading astray, blinding and slaying their children. And Noah prayed before the Lord his God, saying, God of the spirits of all flesh, who hast shown mercy unto me, and hast saved me and my sons from the waters of the flood, and hast not caused me to perish, as thou didst the sons of perdition. For thy grace hath been great towards me, and great hath been thy mercy to my soul. Let thy grace be lifted up upon my sons, and let not wicked spirits rule over them, lest they should destroy them from the earth. But do thou bless me and my sons, that we may increase and multiply and replenish the earth. And thou knowest how thy watchers, the fathers of these spirits, acted in my day. As for these spirits, which are living, imprison them, and hold them fast in the place of condemnation, and let them not bring destruction on the sons of thy servant my God. For these are malignant and created in order to destroy. Let them not rule over the spirits of the living, for thou alone canst exercise dominion over them. Let them not have power over the sons of the righteous, from henceforth and forevermore. And the Lord our God commanded us to bind them all. But the chief of the spirits, Mastema, came and said, Lord Creator, let some of them remain before me, and let them hearken to my voice, and do all that I shall say unto them. For if some of them are not left to me, I shall not be able to execute the power of my will on the sons of men. For these are for corruption and for leading astray before my judgment, for great is the wickedness of the sons of men. And the Lord said, Let 1/10 part of them remain before him, and let 9 parts descend into the place of condemnation. And one of us was commanded to teach Noah all their medicines, for the Lord knew that men would not walk in uprightness, nor strive in righteousness. We did according to his words all the malignant evil ones we bound in the place of condemnation, and 1/10 part of them we left to be subject before Satan on the earth. And we explained to Noah all the medicines for their diseases, together with their seductions, that he might heal them with herbs of the earth. Noah wrote down all these things in a book, as we instructed him concerning every kind of medicine. Thus, the evil spirits were restrained from hurting the sons of Noah. He gave all that he had written to Shem, his eldest son, for he loved him exceedingly above all his sons. And Noah slept with his fathers, and was buried on Mount Lubar, in the land of Ararat. He lived 950 years in all 19 Jubilees, 2 weeks and 5 years. In his life on earth, he excelled the children of men save Enoch because of his righteousness, for in it he was perfect. But Enoch's office was ordained as a testimony to the generations of the world, that he should recount all the deeds of each generation until the day of judgment. In the 33rd Jubilee, in the 1st year of the 2nd week, Peleg took to himself a wife whose name was Lomna, the daughter of Sinaar. She bore him a son in the 4th year of this week, and he called his name Ru, for he said, Behold, the children of men have become evil through the wicked purpose of building for themselves a city and a tower in the land of Shinar. For they departed from the land of Ararat eastward to Shinar. For in his days they built the city and the tower, saying, Come, let us ascend thereby into heaven. And they began to build. In the 4th week they made brick with fire, and the bricks served them for stone, and the clay with which they cemented them together was asphalt that came out of the sea and from the fountains of water in the land of Shinar, and they built it. For 43 years they were building it. Its breadth was 203 bricks, and the height of a brick was the 1/3 of one. Its total height amounted to 5,433 cubits and 2 palms, and the extent of one wall was 13 stades, and of the other 30 stades. And the Lord our God said unto us, Behold, they are one people, and this they begin to do, and now nothing will be withheld from them. Come, let us go down and confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. And they may be dispersed into cities and nations, and one purpose will no longer abide with them, till the day of judgment. And the Lord descended, and we descended with him to see the city and the tower which the children of men had built. And he confounded their language, and they no longer understood one another's speech. And they ceased then to build the city and the tower. For this reason, the whole land of Shinar is called Babel, because there the Lord confounded all the language of the children of men. And from thence they were dispersed into their cities, each according to his language and his nation. And the Lord sent a mighty wind against the tower, and overthrew it upon the earth. And behold, it was between Ashur and Babylon in the land of Shinar. And they called its name Overthrow. And in the 4th week in the 1st year, at the beginning of the 34th Jubilee, they were dispersed from the land of Shinar. And in the 35th Jubilee, in the 3rd week in the 1st year thereof, Ru took to himself a wife, and her name was Orah, the daughter of the son of Chesed. She bore him a son, and in the 7th year of this week, in this Jubilee, he called his name Serah. And the sons of Noah began to war with each other, to take captives, and to slay one another, and to shed the blood of men on the earth. They began to eat blood, and to build strong cities' walls and towers. Individuals began to exalt themselves above the nation, to found kingdoms, and to wage war. People against people, nation against nation, city against city. All began to do evil, to acquire arms, to teach their sons the ways of war, to capture cities, and to sell both male and female slaves. For the son of Chesed built the city of Arah of the Chaldees, and named it after himself and the name of his father. And the people made for themselves molten images, and worshipped the idols they had fashioned. They began to carve graven images and unclean figures, and malignant spirits seduced them into transgression and uncleanness. The prince Mastema stirred all this into motion, sending forth other spirits under his command to corrupt, destroy, and shed blood upon the earth. For this reason, the child was named Sero, or Sarug, for in his days, everyone turned to sin and transgression. Sarug grew up and lived in Ur of the Chaldees, near the house of his wife's mother. He too worshipped idols, and in the 36th Jubilee in the 5th week in the 1st year thereof, he took to himself a wife named Melka, the daughter of Kaber, who was the daughter of his father's brother. She bore him a son named Nahor in the 1st year of that week. Nahor grew up in Ur of the Chaldees, where his father taught him the lore of the Chaldees' divination and augury by the signs of heaven. In the 37th Jubilee in the 6th week in the 1st year thereof, Nahor took a wife named Ijaska, the daughter of Nestug of the Chaldees. And in the 7th year of that week, she bore him Terah. But Mastema continued his work. He sent ravens and birds to devour the seed that was sown in the land, to rob men of their labors. Before the farmers could plow in the seed, the birds plucked it from the ground. For this reason, the boy was called Terah, for the ravens and birds reduced the people to destitution and devoured their seed. The years grew barren, for the birds consumed the fruit of the trees, and only with great effort could the people save a little of the earth's produce in those days. And in the 39th Jubilee, in the 2nd week in the 1st year thereof, Terah took a wife named Edna, the daughter of Abram, who was the daughter of his father's sister. And in the 7th year of this week she bore him a son, and he called his name Abram, after the name of his mother's father, who had died before his daughter conceived a son. And the child began to perceive the errors of the earth, for all men went astray after graven images and uncleanness. His father taught him writing, and when he was 2 weeks of years old, he separated himself from his father, that he might not worship idols with him. And Abram began to pray to the Creator of all things, asking that he might save him from the errors of the children of men, and that his portion should not fall into uncleanness and vileness. When the season came for the sowing of seed upon the land, all went out together to protect their seed against the ravens, and Abram went out with them. He was a lad of 14 years. Then a cloud of ravens came to devour the seed. But Abram ran forward before they could settle on the ground. He cried out to them, saying, "Descend not. Return to the place whence you came." And they turned back. That day he drove away clouds of ravens 70 times, and throughout all the land where Abram was, not one raven settled. All who were with him throughout the land saw him cry out, and all the ravens turned back, and his name became great in all the land of the Chaldees. That year many who wished to sow came to him, and Abram went with them until the season of sowing ended. They sowed their land, and that year they brought home abundant grain, and ate and were satisfied. And in the 1st year of the 5th week, Abram taught the craftsmen who made implements for oxen. He instructed the workers in wood to make a vessel fixed above the plow, into which the seed was placed. From there the seed would fall upon the share of the plow and be hidden in the earth, so that they no longer feared the ravens. And after this manner they fashioned vessels above all the plows, and they sowed and tilled the land, as Abram had commanded them. And they feared the birds no more. Everyone has just heard an incredibly strange passage from the book of Jubilees. A 14-year-old boy named Abram was able to use his words to control flocks of vicious ravens, and then went on to invent a mechanical device that helped protect seeds beneath the soil. But pause for a moment. Do not let the outer garment of an ancient mythological story deceive your vision. If we strip away the religious terminology and examine it through the lens of the dark projects once carried out by the CIA, this passage is in fact an observational record of the awakening of a human individual before systems of foreign control. It is hard evidence of the intersection between higher consciousness and ancient technology. As former official Haim Esht revealed, consciousness is the one source code that advanced extraterrestrial beings still have not been able to fully decode. Abram's ability to command the ravens to turn back was not magic. but proof that human beings possess an energetic frequency capable of directly influencing the biological structure of living things. Think back to the CIA's Stargate project. Why did they pour billions of dollars into researching people who could see at a distance or physically affect things from afar? The answer is right here. They were trying to recreate humanity's original power, the very power Abram used to break the attack of natural forces that had been programmed to harm mankind. In the book of Jubilees, Abram's separation from his father, a maker of idols, carries deep political and spiritual meaning. The graven images his father worshipped were not merely lifeless objects of wood and stone. They symbolized the mind control programs that the Watchers had embedded into human society. By refusing to worship intermediary beings, Abram directly disconnected himself from the false belief system established by the Galactic Federation. That act was like pulling the plug on a machine of illusion and returning to a direct connection with the Creator, the original energy source of the universe. This was the first step in reclaiming genetic freedom and sovereignty over the soul. The most astonishing detail is that Abram instructed craftsmen to build an automatic seed sowing device directly onto the plow blade. Think about that. Why would a 14-year-old boy possess engineering insights so far beyond his time? From a conspiracy perspective, this was not random creativity, but a form of downloaded knowledge. Abram received technical solutions to help humanity break free from the crushing grip of survival under harsh conditions. While the forces of Mastema were trying to use disaster and plague, symbolized by the ravens, to drive humanity into famine and submission, Abram brought a technology designed to resist that manipulation. Could this have been a form of revealed knowledge, meant to help humanity escape the grip of nature itself, a nature already being manipulated by the forces of Mastema? Look deeply into this truth. Abram's plow was not merely an agricultural tool. It was a symbol of resistance. In a world where fallen entities wanted to use scarcity and fear to force humanity to its knees, Abram's wisdom became the key that opened the door to freedom. It proved that when human beings reconnect with the original source of light, we not only gain the power to influence living creatures like the ravens, but also the ability to create material solutions for our own survival without needing the calculated favor of foreign entities. That is precisely why the Book of Jubilees became a hunted target. Imagine this: for thousands of years, humanity has been like children locked inside a glass cage. Those standing behind the curtain, whether powerful bloodlines or extraterrestrial beings, have always told us, the world outside is dangerous. You are weak and full of flaws. Without our protection and guidance, you will perish. This is exactly the empire of mind control that Michael Relf spoke of. They want us to become willing slaves because we are afraid of ourselves. But when we open the Book of Jubilees and look at the actions of the boy Abram, the truth is exposed: that glass cage was never really locked. Abram driving away the ravens with his words and building his own seed-sowing device is a powerful declaration. First, humanity is not weak at all. We possess the ability to affect this world through our own will, just as Abram influenced the living creatures. Second, we do not need some higher power to hand us technology or food. We have enough intelligence to create our own means of survival, just as Abram improved the plow. That is why book number 3 stands as a reminder that true power lies in awakening. The CIA and the elite buried this book because they did not want you to know this. You are in fact the rightful steward of this planet, carrying within you the superior genetic inheritance of ancient forebears who could move even heaven and earth. But why have the elites been able to hold such tight control for thousands of years? Are they simply masters of deception? Or do they truly possess an eye that can see into every corner of time itself and stay one step ahead of humanity? That is the moment when we must face one of the most terrifying files ever leaked. Book number 4, Operation Looking Glass and the Chronovisor Time-Piercing Machine. If the Mars Records speaks about space and the Book of Jubilees speaks about bloodlines, then this 4th file will expose the secret of time. There are enormous conspiracy theories claiming that the CIA and the Vatican The two most powerful institutions on Earth, one holding weapons, the other holding souls, joined hands to conceal a device called the Chronovisor. This was not a physical time travel machine in the usual sense, but a kind of electromagnetic receiver transmitter that allowed its user to see and hear past events as though watching a live television broadcast. Imagine if you could see exactly what happened when Jesus was crucified, or what Noah did aboard the ark in the middle of the Great Flood. You would hold the full power to rewrite history. The Vatican has been accused of possessing this technology since the 1950s through a Benedictine priest named Marcello Ernetti. But instead of revealing it to the world, they allegedly chose to join forces with United States intelligence and fold it into a classified file under the codename Operation Looking Glass. In reality, Operation Looking Glass was not an ordinary literary or philosophical book, but the name of a top-secret file and a set of leaked reports related to one of the most controversial time observation technologies in the history of United States intelligence. The core content of this body of material revolves around the existence of a high-level technical device said to be capable of bending space-time in order to view future probabilities or reflections of the past, as though looking into a mirror. The origin of these materials does not come from a single specific author, but was compiled from the testimony of well-known whistleblowers who had worked in black projects of the United States government in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Most notably the engineer Dan Burish. According to these reports, the Looking Glass device was built through reverse engineering extraterrestrial technology, using extremely powerful magnetic rings to create an artificial black hole from which visual data could be gathered from different timelines. The most shocking claim within this file is that military scientists discovered a strange convergence point around the year 2012 and beyond, where every timeline appeared to lead to one single outcome: either a great awakening of humanity or an unavoidable global geological event. Because of the ability to see through these future scenarios, the elite have been accused of using the device to manipulate political and economic events in order to maintain control, while also trying to prevent the timelines in which their power is threatened. The emergence of this information created a massive wave of conspiracy theories as people connected it with the Vatican's Chronovisor, forming a picture of an alliance that possessed an eye of time in order to rule the world from the shadows. The CIA worked hard to seal off and deny these materials because they exposed a brutal truth. Our future is being watched and interfered with by those who hold the technology to see through destiny. To understand why human history has been manipulated with such precision, we must look at the two devices considered the eyes of God, yet placed in the hands of mortal men, the CIA's Looking Glass and the Vatican's Chronovisor. Travel back to the 1950s. Father Marcello Ernetti, a brilliant scientist and a Benedictine priest, caused a sensation when he claimed to have successfully built the Chronovisor. This was not a time machine, but a device designed to capture the electromagnetic frequencies left behind by past events. Its principle was based on the theory that every sound and image in history never truly disappears. They merely transform into energy and continue floating through space. This machine could tune in to those signals and reconstruct the most authentic scenes imaginable, from the crucifixion of Jesus to the collapse of empires. The Vatican immediately sealed this device away in its highest security underground vaults, because it understood one truth: whoever controls the past controls the interpretation of truth. While the Vatican looked backward, the Looking Glass project in America's underground military bases looked forward. Using space-time distortion technology, said to have been obtained from crashed flying saucers, the CIA could observe future probabilities. They did not see one fixed ending, but millions of branching paths of coming events. The connection between these two devices formed a vice tightening around humanity. The Vatican used the Chronovisor to erase traces. They looked into the past to determine which truths, such as the Nephilim bloodline or Abram's rise in the Book of Jubilees, threatened to shake their faith structure and their power. From there, they revised sacred texts, destroyed artifacts, and rewrote history according to their will. The CIA used looking glass to cut off the future in advance. They looked into probabilities to know when humanity would experience a push in consciousness, when a true leader would arise, or when Chan Thomas's catastrophe would arrive. They adjusted policy, created artificial crises, or manipulated the media in order to steer the masses into the timeline branch that was easiest for them to rule. Imagine that you are playing a game of chess in which your opponent knows every move you made in the past through the Chronovisor, while also seeing every move you are about to make in the future through looking glass. You would have no chance of winning. That is exactly why the files on these two devices were so heavily sealed. The elite feared that if humanity ever learned of their existence, we would realize a shocking truth: the future is not fixed. Once we awaken, as Abram did, we begin creating variables that even looking glass cannot predict. The connection between the CIA and the Vatican is the final effort to keep humanity inside an endless time loop, where we remain forever like sheep, never realizing that we are being led by those who hold the mirror of destiny. If the past has been rewritten by the Vatican and the future is now being staged by the CIA, then what do we have left? We have the present. Only when you become aware of the existence of these time machines can you begin to break their manipulation. Now, let us go deeper into the next file to see what time soldiers like Michael Relf truly saw when they were thrown into the middle of these chaotic timelines. The 2012 convergence point and the collapse of the simulated timeline. When time soldiers like Michael Relf were thrown into the middle of chaotic timelines, they reported a phenomenon that the CIA called the timeline collision. Imagine that the elite use looking glass to look into the future, the way someone studies a map with thousands of different roads. They always choose the road that best serves their rule. And yet, beginning in the period after the year 2012, declassified reports say that the device began to experience a terrifying system failure. Every road, every manipulation scenario led to one single ending. Scientists at underground bases realized that no matter how hard they tried to create wars, pandemics, or disasters in order to steer humanity toward enslavement, the timeline would still bend itself back toward a state of full awakening. They called this the unavoidable convergence point. Michael Relf and those involved in the 20 and Back project described it this way: a source of energy from the center of the galaxy is pouring into Earth, shaking the Nephilim code and awakening the sleeping part of human consciousness. At that point, the Vatican's Chronovisor could no longer see old footage to distort, and the CIA's looking glass could no longer draw a future in which they still held control. Why did the CIA and the Vatican panic? The connection between the two devices began to be disrupted by signal interference. The Vatican was afraid because the Chronovisor showed that the truths about the bloodline of Abram and Noah were beginning to rise within the people. The CIA was afraid because looking glass showed that every effort to establish a new world order was collapsing under the spontaneous awakening of humanity. Michael Relf revealed that because the elite can no longer manipulate the distant future, they are now pouring all their strength into freezing humanity in a frequency of fear in the present. They use the media 5G technology and global-level MK Ultra mind control projects to keep us from reaching that convergence point. They know that once humanity passes through that point, every Chronovisor and every looking glass will become nothing more than scrap metal. Because at that moment, human beings will truly become giants in consciousness, creating reality for themselves without needing any mirror to show them the way. But why did such a great technology as the Chronovisor disappear without a trace? The answer lies in a bitter internal purge deep within the Vatican itself. In the late 1960s, Father Marcello Ernetti began to realize that he had opened a door humanity was never meant to touch. With the Chronovisor, he did not only see the past, he saw horrifying cracks in the official history that the Church had spent 2,000 years constructing. He realized that truth could set humanity free, but it could also overthrow an empire. When Ernetti intended to release the footage of the real life of Jesus, the Vatican intervened immediately. A special committee from the Office of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith summoned him. They gave him a ruthless ultimatum: either destroy the machine and remain silent forever, or be excommunicated and face the most terrible punishment. They argued, humanity is not ready for the truth. Without unquestioning faith, the world will fall into chaos. But in reality, they were afraid that if people saw the true past, the absolute power of the Holy See would dissolve into nothing. Under crushing pressure and constant 24-hour surveillance by Vatican security forces, Ernetti was forced to dismantle his spiritual child with his own hands. The most important components of the Chronovisor were confiscated and taken deep into the secret archives, the Vatican Apostolic Archive, a place where even cardinals had no authority to enter. Before his death in 1994, Ernetti wrote a haunting final letter, admitting that the device truly existed and that it was extremely dangerous because it could strip human beings of their freedom of choice. He was forced to sign a pledge of secrecy that bound him until his final breath. And the drama did not end there. There are leaked intelligence sources claiming that the Vatican never destroyed the design blueprints. Instead, it carried out a secret exchange with the CIA during the Cold War. The Vatican held the software knowledge of ancient timelines, while the CIA supplied the hardware nuclear technology and supercomputing systems. This combination became the precursor to Operation Looking Glass. They turned a tool for seeking truth into a weapon for manipulating the future. Father Ernetti died in deep disappointment, but the time monster he created is still alive, moving through the most secret basements of the United States government, silently watching your every action, even now. When you look into the mirror tomorrow morning, ask yourself, this is that image really you, or only a reflection that has already been programmed by the looking glass machine? The secret of the Chronovisor is not merely a story about a lost machine. It is proof that truth is always hunted by those who want to play God. But prepare yourself for this. The Chronovisor and the looking glass are only the tip of the iceberg. In reality, the CIA and the Vatican are not merely hiding machines. They are guarding an entire cursed bank of knowledge belonging to humanity. There are terrifying rumors that beneath the sealed vaults of the Vatican Apostolic Library, guarded by Swiss guards and the most advanced American electronic security systems, there are things being stored that could completely shatter our worldview. The Cursed Archive, the books that have never been released. It is said that deep beneath the Vatican Apostolic Library in chambers where sunlight has never touched, there are gold and crystal manuscripts from pre-flood civilizations, such as Atlantis and Lemuria, containing secrets of eternal energy and anti-gravity technology that the CIA sealed away in order to protect the global economic order. Beside them are said to lie the Watcher's journals, a complete original archive even more detailed than the Book of Jubilees, exposing the genetic procedures alien entities used to redesign human DNA in ancient laboratories. Even more terrifying is the presence of the Book of Parallel Timelines, a living entity of constantly shifting images that allows its possessor to see every event on Earth from the earliest beginning to the end of the world. And that is not all. Deep within those ultra-secret underground vaults is said to rest the complete Book of Enoch. Not the version we see today, but the original manuscript containing mathematical and astronomical formulas far beyond its age, the very knowledge the Watchers taught humanity, which the Church cut away in order to keep mankind in the ignorance of the Middle Ages. Continuing that pattern of suppression is the decoded Voynich manuscript, a strange biological record that some researchers believe the CIA holds the key to exposing plants not found on Earth and genetic modification experiments from parallel civilizations. Most dramatic of all is the alleged presence of the ancient Book of Thoth, the treasure of Egypt, said to contain 2 incantations that allow the reader to see through the gods and understand the language of all things. A kind of spiritual weapon that the elite then used to build Operation Looking Glass in order to manipulate future probabilities. Alongside these leaked reports, also mention the Book of Giants from the Dead Sea Scrolls, recording in detail the interplanetary battles between the Nephilim and the heavenly hosts, a part of history written in blood and fire that the Vatican tried to erase and replace with peaceful religious narratives. The existence of these archives, from Nikola Tesla's manuscripts on eternal energy, seized by the FBI, to Nostradamus's true prophecies about the end of the ruling powers, is precisely why every effort to gain access to the Vatican underground vaults has been blocked by an invisible wall of security. And the existence of these archives is exactly why the reports on Operation Looking Glass have been sealed so tightly, because they are the final pieces in a vast plan to imprison human consciousness inside a simulated timeline, preventing us from recognizing the true power within our own bloodline. But there is one truth that the CIA's time-viewing mirrors never want you to touch: the power of self-redemption that lies within the awareness of each individual. And to understand why that freedom is considered the greatest threat to the world order, we must open another explosive file, the Gnostic Gospels by Professor Elaine Pagels, published in 1979. This is not merely a work of scholarship. It is a forceful indictment exposing what was deliberately removed from human history. Through her decoding of the ancient texts at Nag Hammadi Pagels, brought to light the forgotten Gospels, such as the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, manuscripts that the Church had ordered completely destroyed in the 4th century on the charge of heresy. Why were these books considered so dangerous that they had to be wiped out entirely? Let us explore that now. Book number 5, the Gnostic Gospels. The existence of those vast archives beneath the Vatican underground is exactly why the reports on Operation Looking Glass were sealed so tightly. They are the final pieces in a vast plan to trap human consciousness inside a simulated timeline, preventing us from recognizing the true power of our own bloodline. But to understand why that power is so terrifying to those in authority, we must turn back time to December 1945 in Upper Egypt. Few people know that the beginning of one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of the 20th century was tied to an act of blood revenge. In the region of Jabal al-Tarif, where more than 150 caves had been used as burial sites as far back as 4,300 years ago, an Arab farmer named Muhammad Ali al-Saman and his brothers were digging for sabak, a soft soil used as fertilizer, when they found a red earthen jar nearly 1 meter tall. At first, Muhammad hesitated because he feared there might be a jinn, a spirit, dwelling inside. But the lure of gold and treasure drove him to swing his mattock and smash the jar open. Inside there was no gold, only 13 papyrus books bound in leather. Muhammad took them home and threw them onto a pile of straw beside the oven. His mother, Ahmad, even used much of the loose papyrus pages to feed the fire in the oven. Only a few weeks later, tragedy struck. To avenge their father's death, Muhammad and his brothers seized the opportunity to kill their enemy, Ahmed Ismail. It was precisely because Muhammad feared that a police search of the house would uncover the ancient books that he tried to get rid of them through school teachers and black market antiquities dealers in Cairo. 10.5 of the books were confiscated by the Egyptian government, but a large portion of the 13th book was smuggled into the United States. When the news reached Professor Gilles Quispel in the Netherlands, he urged the Jung Foundation to purchase it. In the spring of 1955, at a hotel in Cairo, Quispel was stunned as he deciphered the opening line. "These are the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke and which Didymus Judas Thomas wrote down." From those scattered fragments covered in blood and dust, a shocking truth slowly began to emerge. Based on these discoveries, Professor Elaine Pagels published her groundbreaking work, The Gnostic Gospels, in 1979. She unpacked the books that had been excluded from the Orthodox Bible, exposing a whole system of thought that the ruling powers deeply feared. Let us now go deeper into the details they have tried to bury for 1,600 years. First of all, we must begin with the Gospel of Thomas, the Manifesto of Awakening. This is not a biography of the life of Christ, but a collection of 114 secret sayings. Here, Jesus does not appear as a judge condemning sin, but as a spiritual teacher guiding humanity back to its true being. Its most famous teaching is this: if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, What you do not bring forth will destroy you. The hidden meaning is this: what is within you is the divine spark and the true potential in your DNA. If you awaken it, you will be free. If you bury it beneath the fear imposed by the control system, you will destroy yourself. Thomas also declares, "Whoever drinks from my mouth will become like me. I myself shall become that person." This is absolute equality between humanity and the divine, a direct blow to the Church's hierarchical system. The second book in the collection is the Gospel of Philip. This book reveals a detail that the Vatican has worked tirelessly to erase from every picture of history: the role of Mary Magdalene. The Gospel of Philip describes her as Jesus' companion koinonos, a term implying marriage or an intimate partner. The fact that Jesus frequently kissed her on the mouth was not merely a sign of affection, but implied a transmission of knowledge and bloodline. When the other disciples asked in jealousy, "Why do you love her more than all of us?" he responded with a question that forced them to confront the poverty of their own understanding. Philip also openly criticizes teachings such as the virgin birth and bodily resurrection as naive misunderstandings, treating them instead as metaphors for the rebirth of consciousness rather than physical miracles. However, if you truly want to understand the nature of the mind control system the CIA and the Vatican are concealing, then we are forced to open the darkest file in the Nag Hammadi library, the Apocryphon of John. This is not merely a book. It is a map of the cosmos, exposing the intervention of alien entities in the evolutionary process of humanity. The book begins by revealing the mysteries and hidden things that the living Jesus taught to the disciple John about the true structure of the universe. It is here that we are introduced to the archons, the rulers. According to the Apocryphon of John, these are cruel multidimensional beings created by a false creator named Yaldabaoth. What is terrifying is that the archons do not regard us as children. They regard us as livestock. They created this material world, including our biological bodies, as a prison of frequency meant to lock the human soul into forgetfulness, preventing us from recognizing our divine origin. And the resemblance is so close, it sends a chill through the body. Think back to what Haim Eshed, the former head of space at Israel's Ministry of Defense, revealed in 2020. He affirmed the existence of a galactic federation that had signed secret agreements with the United States government to conduct experiments on Earth, and that they were keeping their presence hidden in order to avoid mass hysteria until humanity was ready. If we interpret Eshed's words through the lens of the Apocryphon of John, the picture becomes far clearer and far more ruthless. Why did the CIA seal away Operation Looking Glass? And why did the Vatican suppress the Apocryphon of John? Because they are observational records of the archons. The ruling powers hide the book, not because they fear God, but because they fear that you will discover this truth. Your highest government is actually a federation of multidimensional ruling entities. The archons and Earth's elites are merely their low-level handlers. The future probabilities seen through Looking Glass are not random. They are scenarios designed by the archons to keep humanity in fear, in war, and in dependence. The CIA hides this machine because they do not want you to know that your future is being written by beings who regard you as stored energy. The experiments Eshed referred to are not peaceful scientific studies. According to the Gnostic view, they are the continuous genetic interventions of the archons. The forces of Mastema designed to weaken your DNA and sever your connection to the supreme source of light, ensuring that this material prison is never broken. The Apocryphon of John is not heresy. It is a warning. It teaches that the living Jesus came to bring gnosis, the key to awakening consciousness, to breaking the time trap and the control programs of the archons. That is exactly why the Vatican ordered the extermination of Gnosticism and why the CIA sealed Looking Glass. Because the greatest enemy of domination is not another church, but a humanity awakened to the power of its Gnostic bloodline. From John Thomas's shifting poles to Haim Eshed's Mars Alliance to Mastema's genetic trap to the Archon Matrix in the Apocryphon of John, every piece has finally come together. These texts have thrown open the secret door that mainstream religious versions dismissed as childish or heretical. They are not merely ancient pages of ink and paper. They are a manual for breaking the time trap that humanity lost long ago. So what is the true weak point? The one that made information about divine equality. The bloodline of Mary Magdalene and the Archon entities, something the CIA and the Vatican have hidden for thousands of years. The answer does not lie in complex doctrines, but in a single concept, Gnosis spiritual knowing. This is the deepest terror of every ruling system, because Gnosis is not book knowledge, not the kind of rational understanding you can learn in schools or churches. It is an intense inner process by which you come to see yourself directly, and through that self-knowing, you come into direct contact with God, without the need for any intermediary. The teacher Mononimus said, "Investigate who it is within you that says, 'My God, my mind.' You will find him within yourself." This overturns completely the Orthodox Christian idea of an abyss separating humanity from the Creator. Here, self-knowledge is knowledge of God. The self and the divine are one. In the testimony of truth, even the story of the Garden of Eden is told from the point of view of the serpent. Here, the serpent is the embodiment of divine wisdom, helping Adam and Eve receive knowledge, while God appears jealous, threatening them with death and driving them out of paradise in order to stop them from attaining understanding. The awakening of the individual is the greatest threat to every system of rule. That is why these texts were buried for nearly 2,000 years. In the 2nd century, Bishop Irenaeus wrote 5 volumes aimed at destroying what is falsely called knowledge, condemning the gospel of truth as full of blasphemy. By the 4th century, when Emperor Constantine converted Christianity, became a political institution. Possessing these books became a criminal offense, and the copies were burned. The copies were burned, and the believers were driven out, only because some unknown courageous monk hid them in an earthen jar at Nag Hammadi. Was the breath of truth preserved from total destruction by time? Although the CIA did not directly order a ban on Elaine Pagels's book Conspiracy, researchers believe that intelligence organizations and the Vatican have long worked together to maintain a global environment of ignorance. They fear Gnostic knowledge because it offers an antidote to every mind control program of the CIA. When you connect all of this together, the larger picture appears. Once you recognize your own power of self-redemption, as taught in the Gnostic Gospels, every future manipulation scenario of Looking Glass and every simulated timeline collapses completely. They buried these pages because they fear the day humanity realizes that true freedom does not lie on some distant planet or in some outside saving power, but has always lived within your own awareness and your own great bloodline. Do you see it now? From the blood-soaked acts of revenge in Egypt to the top-secret underground levels of the CIA, everything has had one shared purpose: to hide the divine spark within each of us. The truth was never lost. It was only waiting for someone brave enough to lift the mattock and shatter the jar of prejudice. And the journey of decoding the truth is still very long. Do not let yourself remain livestock inside their simulated timeline. Awaken your own awareness, because the key to freedom is already in your hands right now. The greatest enemy of every system of domination is an individual who has awakened to the power of Gnosis within. And once you realize that the Archon entities and the simulated timelines of Looking Glass only function as long as you remain trapped in forgetfulness, you begin to understand why they have used every possible means to seal off the past. But if you think censorship took place only inside CIA military projects, then you are mistaken. Look at what happened at the Dead Sea and alien land. Right here on Earth, a place preserving the genetic codes and ancient writings of a lost age. Book number 6, The Dead Sea Scrolls Deception. Lying more than 400 meters below sea level, the Dead Sea is a place so strange it feels unreal. Here, the salt concentration is so high that no living creature can survive, and the record-breaking atmospheric pressure creates a natural time bubble that preserves everything intact for thousands of years. The towering limestone cliffs of Qumran, with their hundreds of dark and dangerous caves, were not only the refuge of the ancient Essene monks, but according to conspiracy researchers, they were in fact a geological library designed to withstand the destruction of the Great Floods. In 1947, when a shepherd boy accidentally threw a stone into a cave and heard the sound of pottery breaking. He unknowingly opened the Pandora's box of history. What was found inside was not merely a collection of ordinary religious manuscripts. Among the goatskin scrolls and papyrus texts were strange writings describing a war between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. Treasure maps engraved on copper that could not be deciphered, and especially records concerning the giant Nephilim we have already encountered in the Book of Enoch. The Dead Sea is not merely a location. It is a physical hard drive of ancient powers. The strangeness of its geography and the extraordinary artifacts discovered there were enough to alarm both intelligence agencies and the Vatican. They realized that if everything hidden in the caves of Qumran were fully revealed, it would prove that the history we were taught in school is only a carefully edited summary. And that was the moment when the deception operation began. Why were these oldest and most important texts kept in darkness for nearly 40 years? Was it really the fear that the scrolls would be damaged? Or was it the fear that what was written inside would shatter the mind prison they had worked so hard to build? The answer began to emerge in 1991, when the book The Dead Sea Scrolls Deception by Michael Bagant and Richard Lee was published, sending shockwaves across the world. The book accused the Vatican of creating a ring of censorship to keep more than 800 manuscripts discovered at Qumran under confinement. But why would they risk their reputation in order to hide them? Look at the list of things that were actually pulled from those caves, things that should never have existed inside an ordinary religious text. First came the copper scroll. Completely unlike the other leather scrolls, this was a sheet of pure copper engraved with writing. It did not contain sacred scripture, but a detailed inventory of 64 locations where dozens of tons of sacred gold and silver were hidden. But under a declassified reading, many researchers believe this was not ordinary treasure at all, but ancient technological devices or genetic relics of the Nephilim bloodline hidden away to await a future return. But what truly shocked people was the War Scroll. With 19 dramatic chapters, it describes a total conflict between the sons of light and the sons of darkness. This text presents the enemy as an alliance between human beings and supernatural entities Belial. The book begins by identifying the enemy not merely as mortal tribes, but as a coalition of humans and supernatural forces. It describes a global mobilization in which the warriors of light are equipped with knowledge of frequency and sound. The way it describes the mustering of armies feels almost identical to a landing of off-world expeditionary forces where the boundary between Earth and sky is completely erased. The most shocking section for UFO researchers is Chapter 7, which describes armies using trumpets of command and banners, not as ceremonial objects, but as instruments that emit vibrational frequencies capable of destroying matter or paralyzing the enemy. Even more striking, Chapter 9 describes mobile watchtowers and blazing flying objects offering support from above. These descriptions align in a chilling way with declassified CIA reports on unidentified aerial phenomena, or UAPs. Could it be that the Sons of Light received technological support from extraterrestrial beings in order to resist the Archons ruling the world? Finally, the appearance of the Archangel Michael leading an army of radiant objects descending from the heavens does not feel like a religious image. It feels more like a military landing from space meant to bring an end to a genetic war that had lasted for centuries. It is clear that the appearance of this text posed a direct threat to the artificial peace narrative that the Vatican and international institutions have tried to preserve. That is why both of these ancient scrolls were banned. But if the War Scroll reveals the military instruments of the heavens, then there is another hidden file that is even more terrifying because it exposes the existence of those who truly ruled the earth before humanity appeared. That file is the Book of Giants. If the Book of Enoch we mentioned earlier was only a summary, then the Book of Giants found at the Dead Sea is a detailed black file on the birth of the Nephilim. These were not merely mythological figures, but are described as real hybrid beings, possessing brutal strength and an intelligence far beyond humanity. There is a reason the Vatican delayed the publication of this book for decades. It reveals a horrifying genetic truth that the bloodline of these giants never completely disappeared after the Great Flood. They left behind hidden genetic codes deep within the most powerful bloodlines of today. The CIA and the Vatican feared that if humanity ever read the chapters describing how the Nephilim manipulated the ancient world, we would realize that the so-called New World Order is actually only the continuation of an ancient dynasty that has existed for thousands of years. So how exactly did that process of suppression unfold? It began more than 60 years ago when an excavation at the caves of Qumran uncovered more than 900 ancient manuscripts, revealing many mysteries about humanity's past. Archaeologists were deeply puzzled when they found an unusual text among them, a scroll that provided clues about the fall of the Nephilim, the giants spoken of in the Bible. It was called the Book of Giants. In a cave near the Dead Sea, archaeologists discovered more than 900 ancient leather books, and among them were records concerning giants. The caves of Qumran, located northwest of the Dead Sea, are a famous archaeological site filled with unanswered mysteries. It was there in 1947 that a Bedouin shepherd accidentally discovered the ancient manuscripts. Later, in 1956, large-scale excavations uncovered as many as 900 manuscripts on parchment manuscripts made of copper, and a small number written on papyrus dating from before Christ. From that point on, they provided us with important glimpses into the past humanity had lived through, alongside the archaeological evidence proving that this place had once been home to the ancient Jewish sect of the Essenes. Archaeologists also discovered an unusually mysterious book, a book about the downfall of the giant Nephilim. They called it the Book of Giants. According to tradition, the Nephilim possessed enormous spiritual powers. They displayed feats of levitation, mind control, and remote viewing. They had mystical power even in speech. They could remove curses and sickness, and they had ways of knowing and predicting the future. They were extremely intelligent. They knew everything about science, architecture, and engineering. They combined these skills with their authority and intelligence to build the pyramids and other great monuments around the world. They created a glorious age for themselves and did great things for human beings. According to the Book of Enoch, they drank blood and taught abortion and were later punished by the divine beings. The giant Nephilim appear in the Jewish Book of Enoch. According to that book, Enoch was the ancestor of the giants. The book deals with the history of the giants, but it is a bleak picture because they are facing destruction after having harmed the earth. When God created the first human being, called the Son of God, the giants still existed, though their numbers were far fewer. After repeatedly facing divine punishment, their civilization was nearly gone. This time, God created man and favored that first new human being by calling him the Son of God. That man, the Son of God, took a wife, had children, and their descendants gradually multiplied. In the final stages of giant history, they fought wars against human beings, but they could not win. The giants knew they would not win. They seemed to know that they were facing the judgment of God. The Book of Enoch describes how the Nephilim Mahweh, son of the angel Barakel, later dreamed a prophetic dream of flooding the destruction of the Great Flood. The Nephilim Ohia and Hahia, sons of the fallen angel Shemyaza, also had similar dreams, and then many other giants received the same warning. This caused the Nephilim to begin realizing their future, and they cried out to Enoch for help. But by then, he had already left the earth. A Nephilim named Mahweh was sent out to make a cosmic journey in search of their ancestor Enoch. One passage mentions him flying with arms like eagles. At the end of the journey, Mahweh met Enoch and begged him to help the Nephilim. But in the end, they still had to pay for the things they had done. The book also records in detail a message that was sent out to all the giants and monsters on earth. Let it be known to all of you giants and monsters that you will not escape judgment for all that you have done, and that you, your wives, your sons, and the wives of your sons will not escape. And that because of your corruption on the earth, you will receive judgment from heaven. The earth has cried out and complained about you, and the deeds of your children which have brought suffering upon it. Until the angel Raphael comes from heaven, destruction will begin through a great flood, which will destroy all living creatures, whether in the desert or in the sea. The meaning of what you saw in the dream is the judgment of God. But if now you abandon your covenant with evil and repent, you may yet be spared. After that, a great flood swept away everything and erased all things. The giants disappeared completely from the earth. In Genesis chapter 6, verse 4, another strange detail is revealed that the giants had been appointed into the heart of the earth, and they were not permitted to appear freely on the surface. When the new humanity, the humanity of today, began to enter civilization. And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men, which were of old men of renown. Today, scientists are finding more and more evidence for the existence of giants. Such evidence has appeared in many places around the world, and there have even been painstaking studies over decades on the existence of giants. However, as long as the truth has not been widely spread, many people still do not believe in it, and many remain uncertain about the existence of giants. Our Earth may be like a speck of dust in the universe, yet it still holds countless mysteries that cannot be explained. Beyond those three well-known scrolls, the caves of Qumran along the shores of the Dead Sea also preserved other texts, no less formidable texts that became a nightmare for censors because they challenged every logic of traditional history and religion. At the top of the list of these explosive files stands the Temple Scroll. At more than 8 meters in length, this is not merely a religious text, but in fact an extremely detailed technical blueprint for a massive monumental structure. What astonished specialists is that this scroll is written in the first person as though spoken by the Creator himself, describing architectural structures with astonishing geometric precision, including integrated systems for blood purification, ventilation, and complex hidden chambers. One great question immediately arises: why would a poor community of ascetics living in a harsh desert possess the blueprint for such a high-technology megastructure? Could it be that this was not an ordinary place of worship, but a design manual for constructing an energy transmission station or a gateway directly linking to the powers of the heavens? It was precisely the presence of this kind of knowledge, far ahead of its age, that led to the emergence of a secret protective order, recorded in the Zadokite document, also known as the Damascus document. This text reveals a mysterious figure bearing the title of the Teacher of Righteousness, a man who led a separate community in order to preserve a new covenant and the secrets of a pure bloodline. The document speaks of a flight into the desert of Damascus, a location that many conspiracy researchers believe was actually a code name for a secret base, or perhaps even another dimension. Could it be that the Teacher of Righteousness was the one who received instructions from the Galactic Federation to preserve human wisdom against the genetic invasion of the Archons? And that this is why the Vatican and the CIA have always tried to erase every trace of those who carried this awakening code within their blood. The link between earth and the heavenly realm reaches its peak in the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice. This is considered one of the strangest texts ever discovered, describing in detail the liturgy of the heavenly court, with images of blazing chariots, living beings covered with eyes, and sounds of extremely high frequency. These descriptions align with astonishing accuracy with modern reports of spacecraft and multi-dimensional entities. Under a declassified reading, these songs are actually frequency codes used to open gateways in space. The Vatican kept these melodies hidden because it did not want you to know that sound itself is the key to breaking the frequency prison that the Archons established around the Earth in order to imprison the souls of humanity. Finally, to strengthen the theory of intervention by extraterrestrial powers, we come to the Genesis Apocryphon. This is a controversial, expanded version of the book of Genesis telling of Noah's birth, with details completely different from those in the Orthodox Bible. The text records that when Noah was born, his body shone so brightly that it lit up the whole house, and he could speak immediately like a grown man. Noah's father Lamech was terrified and suspected that his wife had conceived with the Watchers, the guardians from heaven. This stands as one of the clearest pieces of evidence for interplanetary genetic intervention. The Vatican feared this detail because it admits that the greatest patriarchs of humanity were in fact highly advanced hybrid beings carrying the bloodline of extraterrestrial entities. A truth that could collapse the entire religious hierarchy they worked so hard to build. And it does not stop there. If the Sabbath songs reveal the technology of sound, then the Zadokite document, also known as the Damascus document, exposes an even more terrifying hidden war. The war for control of humanity's genetic code. This is one of the most important texts found in the caves of Qumran, revealing the existence of a mysterious figure bearing the title of the Teacher of Righteousness. This document tells of a group called the Sons of Zadok, who chose to abandon the official religious system in Jerusalem and flee into the desert of Damascus. But through the lens of conspiracy researchers, Damascus here is not necessarily a geographical place on a map. It is believed to have been a code name for a secret base, or even a kind of buffer zone between dimensions. There, the Teacher of Righteousness established a separate community in order to protect a new covenant, which in reality was a strict body of rules meant to preserve the purity of human bloodline and consciousness against the corruption of the outside world. The Zadokite document describes a lifelong enemy of the Teacher of Righteousness, known as the liar or the scoffer. This figure used cunning words to lead the masses into delusion, causing them to forget their true origin. The strange parallel here is this: while the archons, the multidimensional ruling entities, use the simulated timelines of Looking Glass to imprison human consciousness, the liar in this document is their representative on Earth. His task is to contaminate the awakening bloodline by spreading false beliefs. The Teacher of Righteousness, by contrast, serves as a guardian of the gene, keeping the spark of gnosis from being extinguished in the darkness of ignorance. Why have the Vatican and the CIA worked so hard to erase every trace connected to this figure? Because there are clues suggesting that the Teacher of Righteousness did not work alone. Many researchers believe that he received direct guidance from the beings of the heavens, or what Haim Eshed referred to as the Galactic Federation. His mission was to preserve a group of people carrying the awakening gene code, the remnant, in preparation for a turning point in history, the day when humanity would be ready to break the chains of the archons. The Zadokite document is the genetic testament recording how to identify those who belong to the side of light and those who have sold their souls to darkness. Controlling the Zadokite document for 40 years was one of the ways the elite prevented us from finding the guide within ourselves. They feared that if you understood what the Teacher of Righteousness taught, you would realize that you are part of an army of light that has existed for thousands of years, silently waiting for the moment to overthrow this matrix of reality. From the blueprint of a high-technology temple to the genetic record of Noah's birth. The Dead Sea is not merely a graveyard of the past. It is a vast data archive that they have quietly decoded and sealed away in order to control your future, by hiding the truth about the great bloodline you carry within you. The deception at the Dead Sea did not stop with technological blueprints or UFO warfare. It reached even deeper into the decoding of time itself and the purity of the human race. The clearest proof of this is the Habakkuk commentary. This is not an ordinary biblical text at all, but in reality a terrifying time decryption document. The text uses a special interpretive method called Pesher, showing that the Qumran priests believed the ancient prophecies were not about the past, but were coded messages meant exclusively for the last days. What has shocked UFO researchers and conspiracy theorists most is the appearance of a brutal invading power called the Kittim. Although Orthodox history identifies this as a code name for the Roman Empire. The descriptions of their destructive force and the way they move have led many to associate them with a modern foreign power. Why would the CIA be especially interested in such an ancient commentary? The answer may lie here. The Pesher method reveals that human history operates according to precise, algorithmic cycles. They fear that you might discover that the world-shaking events of our own time were in fact already programmed into these scrolls 2,000 years ago. From decoding the algorithm of time, we move into a file even more mysterious, the file concerning beings who stand outside the cycle of birth and death. That is the Melchizedek document. This text introduces a supernatural being named Melchizedek, described as having no father, no mother, no genealogy, and seeming to exist completely independent of humanity's timeline. Melchizedek appears as a god king, one who will arrive at the end of the 10th Jubilee to carry out the final judgment and free human souls from the chains of Belial, or, in other words, the multidimensional archon beings who rule. When viewed through the lens of the Galactic Federation, Melchizedek is not an ordinary priest, but a high-ranking observer sent to Earth to supervise and intervene in the course of evolution. The Vatican and the CIA have worked hard to hide this file because it confirms a devastating truth. There are multidimensional guardian beings quietly at work to overthrow the rule of the dark powers over humanity. And this directly threatens the world order the elite are trying to preserve. And yet, for the intervention of these observers to be effective, the human bloodline must be carefully prepared, and that is where the strangest texts of all begin to appear. It may sound dry at first, but the ritual purity texts are in fact extremely strict manuals of genetic hygiene. These texts lay out severe regulations about who is permitted to enter the community of light, where the disabled, the deformed, or those considered unclean are completely excluded from the ranks. Why were the priests so obsessed with purity to such an extreme degree? In reality, this was a project to preserve humanity's original bloodline against genetic contamination from fallen entities. Today, the Vatican and secret biological laboratories are using these very same ancient rules to classify individuals who carry awakened DNA and to isolate them from the wider community. They fear that if you understand the purpose of these rituals, you will begin to grasp the true value of the genetic code you carry within you. All of these pieces, the time algorithms in Habakkuk, the appearance of the observer Melchizedek, and the project of genetic hygiene, lead us toward one single conclusion. The deception at the Dead Sea was in fact a global arms race over information and biology. The sealing of these texts for 40 years was not merely to protect doctrine, but to give the elite enough time to decode their secrets and master the future by concealing the truth about your great past. They wanted to hold the key to reality before you could realize that you are the very warriors of light spoken of in those ancient lines. Every banned file is exposing the same truth: your past was stolen so that your future could be controlled. And now, with the veil finally pulled back, will you choose to remain a pawn in the matrix? Or will you awaken to the power of the great bloodline that previous generations worked so hard to protect? The journey through the 6 darkest files that the CIA and the Vatican have worked so hard to conceal has taken us from the barren cliffs of the Dead Sea all the way to the time laboratories of the future. Now look again at the full picture they never wanted you to piece together from John Thomas's catastrophe of polar shift and crustal displacement, which revealed the fragility of civilization, to Jaime Shed's admission of a galactic alliance, from Mastema's genetic traps in the Book of Jubilees, to the existence of the Archons, the multidimensional rulers in the Apocryphon of John, and finally to the 40-year suppression of the truth about the Dead Sea Scrolls and the self-liberating code hidden in the Gnostic Gospels. Why would one of the world's leading intelligence agencies, the CIA, care so deeply about decaying papyrus scrolls locked away in the Vatican underground? The answer does not lie in faith, but in the control of reality. The greatest conspiracy we have just uncovered is the existence of a simulated script coordinated in perfect rhythm between the Holy See and the intelligence agencies. The Vatican holds the key to the past. The genetic records of the Nephilim bloodline, the blueprints of energy temples, and the technology of sound frequency found in the Dead Sea texts. Meanwhile, the CIA holds the technology of the future, the Operation Looking Glass machine used to observe and manipulate timelines. When these two powers join hands, they create a perfect mind prison. They hide your great origin and your genetic power in the past, so that you will feel small, and at the same time, they use Looking Glass to stage future scenarios that keep humanity living in fear and dependence. They fear these books because they reveal that true power does not lie in gods above the clouds or governments beneath underground vaults, but in the awakened Gnosis code flowing through your own blood. The greatest lesson from this chain of 6 banned files is not to drive us into panic, but to help us recover Gnosis, the awakening of true knowing. Every attempt by the elite to seal these records shares the same fatal weakness. They cannot control an individual who has recognized his or her true identity. We have learned that history is not what is written in school textbooks, but a long and relentless war to protect the divine spark against the invasion of the Archon entities and the agents of deception. The discovery of the Nag Hammadi library and the caves of Qumran was not an accident. It was a message from those who came before us, the teachers of righteousness, who sacrificed themselves in order to leave behind a code of escape for future generations. The lesson here is this: as long as you continue searching for salvation outside yourself, you remain livestock inside their matrix. But when you turn inward and shatter the jar of prejudice within yourself, you will see that you are the true master of the timeline. The series, 6 Banned Books, comes to a close here, but the door leading to the truth has only just begun to open. All the evidence of Giant's ancient UFO technology and the blueprints of energy temples points in one direction. Humanity is far greater than what we have been allowed to know. Do not believe only what they want you to believe. Believe what your intuition and your blood are urging you to recognize. Truth is not chained in order to perish, but to wait for warriors of light brave enough to uncover it. Thank you for staying with me through the final moments of this journey of decoding. Are you ready to become the next one to take up the mattock and shatter the chains of the mind? Leave a comment telling me which book shocked you the most. Subscribe to help protect the channel from waves of information, suppression, and always keep your mind awake in this world filled with illusion. Goodbye for now, and I will see you again in the next Declassified Files.